All right, you guys ready? Okay. Pay attention, this is important work. Senate Enrolled Act 42, original Senate File 95.
Senate Enrolled Act number 42, being original Senate File 95, Moon Landing Day, an act relating to legal time and holidays.
Where is Senator Ellis, which needs to be on the floor? I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act 42, originally being Senate File 95. I have so signed. Senate Enrolled Act 43, originally being Senate File 65.
Senate Enrolled Act number 43, being original Senate File 65, Compensation of Local Registrars, repeal, an act relating to vital records.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 43, originally Senate File 65. I have so signed. Senate Enrolled Act number 44, originally Senate File 48. Senator Ellis, you missed moon landing signing. It's done.
Senate Enrolled Act number 44, being original Senate File 58, Sutton Archaeological Site Administration, an act relating to state lands.
I put a smile on your face. I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 44, originally Senate File number 58. I have so signed. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, February 21, 2023, message number 388, third reading passed. Mr. President, the following bills passed the House on third reading by the votes indicated. Senate File 58, Sutton Archaeological Site Administration, ayes 62. Message number 389, Senate File number 65, Compensation of Local Registrars, repeal, ayes 62. Message number 391, Senate File number 95, Moon Landing Day, ayes 54, noes 8.
Guess we did that backwards. That's all right.
Message number 386, concurrence requested, February 21, 2023. Mr. President, the following Senate files passed on third reading in an amended form by the votes indicated. Senate File 21, high occupancy vehicle lanes, ayes 42, noes 20. Message number 387, Senate File 32, prohibiting drones over penal institutions, ayes 59, noes 3. Message number 390, Senate File 66, school capital construction funding, ayes 51, noes 11. Message number 392, Senate File 178, Mountain Lion Pursuit Seasons, ayes 53, noes 9. Message number 393, Senate File 16, State Employee Moving Expenses, ayes 33, noes 29. Message number 394, Senate File 38, Special License Plates Organ Donations, ayes 36, noes 25, excused 1. Message number 395, Senate File 61, Legislator Per Diem, ayes 33, noes 28, excused 1. The House respectfully asks the Senate to concur by adopting amendments. Signed, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Senator Boner, are you ready on message number 393 on Senate File 16?
Mr. President, there's quite a few people off the floor. I think I'll wait on that one if that's okay.
Okay. Do what? Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business. Shoot. Oh, we have some committee reports first. I'm sorry.
February 21, 2023. Mr. President, Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 270 engrossed, Improvement and Service District Limitations. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, Landon, and Scott. No, Senators Barlow and Boner. Senator Case, Chairman. Message number, I beg your pardon, Mr. President, Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 74 engrossed, Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Guru, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 208, School Foundation Program Reserve Account Investments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, and Nethercutt. Excused, Senators Kinski and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 99 engrossed, Property Tax Refund Program. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, and Nethercutt. No, Senator Salazar. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry to interrupt. Could I have privilege of the floor?
Yes, ma'am, you may.
Today, I think we have some really special guests up here to my right. And if you would hold your applause, I would like to introduce each one of them, if I could. These are part of the WWAMI Medical Education Group from the University of Wyoming. These are some of our best and brightest who will hopefully maybe be taking care of some of us later on. I hope they can come back and spend a lot of time here in Wyoming. But let's start with Shayna Bauer. She is from Thermopolis. Trent Bronnenberg from Cody. Ross Cook from Lander. Jenny Ebersberger from Powell. Erin Erickson from Cody. Braden Fusner, I may have mispronounced that. Cody, did I mispronounce? Okay, good. Kel Hinkle from Lander. Caleb Hoops from Sheridan. Hiram Hopkin from Lovell. Daphne Ma from Cheyenne. Hannah Mills from Powell. Casey Pickla from Lander. Franklin Powell from Jackson. Madeline Prince from Cheyenne. Andrew Quinn from Bighorn. Thomas Robitaille, Casper. Mackenzie Stamfel from Cheyenne. Heidi Taggart from Jackson. Galen Tribble from Cody. And Andrew White from Bighorn. With that, I would ask a big welcome from the Senate. These are our best and brightest from WWAMI, University of Wyoming. Hey, stand up.
Making Wyoming better, one doctor at a time. Thank you, guys. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business, consideration of bills on general file.
Mr. President, I move the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole.
Thank you. Senator Larson. You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. We're all
The committee of the whole will please come to order. Our first bill for our consideration is House Bill 38. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 38 engrossed, Wyoming National Guard member referral, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, an act relating to Defense Forces and Affairs. It was referred To committee number 8, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Kolb, acting chairman, was re-referred to committee number 2, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar.
I don't see Senator Boner. Senator Kolb? What is your pleasure? Microphone, I remember now. Chairman? I'm a looking.
Oh, there we go. I move House Bill 38 and would ask for you. Oh, I move when the committee of the whole rises that it do so with a favorable recommendation for House Bill 38. And to explain the bill, I guess it's, I will explain the bill and stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Salazar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was heard in Appropriations Committee, and while we only look at the dollar amount, I will tell you that this is a bill that I support. What this bill really does is it gives an incentive for referrals to the National Guard. Typically, those referrals come from existing members of the National Guard, and so what this bill does is allow a monetary amount of, I think, $500 to bring in a recruit to the National Guard. And this was brought by the National Guard for purposes of recruitment. As you know, right now, all branches of the service are struggling to meet their quota, their yearly quota, and this is an attempt by the National Guard to do the same. And I would encourage your support. Thank you.
Is there any discussion? Yes, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I really appreciate the senator from Fremont County standing up on this one. I just wanted to mention to fellow senators that this was an interim bill from your Transportation and Military Affairs Committee. I think we've all probably heard about the situation that we have with our National Guard, and that is that we are down to pretty critical numbers in terms of strength of the force. And so we looked at several different things that we could maybe do to try to help encourage our young people to go into the Guard. A lot of these young people who choose to do so often come with friends. If they can convince a friend to come with them, we just thought this bill would reward that. And so hope you'll support it. I think it's just one more little tool that they can use to try to bolster the force. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is, based on the fiscal note, what is I see do the math and figure out what the fiscal note, how many that referrals bonuses or whatever this is would give it. What is the goal on an annual basis for recruitment by our military department? Thank you.
Any other discussion? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. Today, I don't have that. I have left the ranks of the Transportation and Military Affairs Committee and not having the current committee here, but I'll go to work and try to make sure we get that information back to everyone.
Thank you, Senator. Any other discussion? Is there a call for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Kolb's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 38 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. House Bill 38 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill. Yes, Majority Floor Leader.
Request that the committee of the whole stand at ease until the sound of the gavel.
Okay. Standing at ease. Committee of the Whole will come back to order. Whoa. Our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 103. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 103, Political Party Affiliation Declaration and Changes, sponsored by Representative Haraldson, an act relating to elections, was referred to Committee Number 3, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, French, Ide, McEwen, no, Senator Pappas. Senator Beitman, Chairman.
Chairman Beitman, you have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure?
And I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with a due pass recommendation of House Bill 103. And for an explanation of the bill, turn over to President Driscoll.
President Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to work through this. I didn't totally prepare myself, but I've co-sponsored on it a few times. Fairly simple bill, folks. This is political party affiliation. Actually, I need to, Mr. Chairman, I move House Bill 103 and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, this is a bill that's been in front of us multiple times, passed out of this body multiple times. If you take a quick run through the thing, page 1 stays all the same. Starting at the top of page 2, says line 1, upon written request of the elector at any time except for the period the party changes are prohibited as specified in statute 22.5.214. That's our statute that deals with this. You drop down, and it used to be we changed must to shall on line 8, and on line 9 they used to declare his party. It says or change party affiliation, and then we strike out or sign an application for change of affiliation in accordance with same statute from above. Before receiving a ballot, it used to say he may receive ballots before receiving a ballot. An elector may vote only the nonpartisan ballot, if so, is not required to declare his party affiliation. Requesting a partisan primary election ballot constitutes a declaration of party affiliation. This is all existing statute. Changing the declaration of party affiliation, and this is inserted language, shall be in accordance with the requirements of Wyoming statutes 22.5.214, shall be entered on the poll. And then here's the meat of the bill. Starting on line 20, 22.5.214, declaration of or change in party affiliation. A, for a primary election, an elector may declare or change party affiliation by completing an application signed before a notarial officer or election official and filling it out with the county clerk before the first day on which an application nomination be filed under statute. Little b, for a general election, this is change, an elector may declare or change his party affiliation by completing an application signed before it and filled in, filing it with the county clerk after the primary election and not less than 14 days before the general election. So you're gonna have to change at least 14 days before requesting it, and it moves it general election. And this is effective immediately. So this bill, as soon as it's signed, will be in, so it'll be in for the next election cycle. What this does, just change the dates, makes it much harder to have the crossover election voting, which we know we've seen in the past. That's pretty simple 2-page bill. I'd ask for your favorable consideration. Stand for questions.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the meat of the bill certainly is on the issue concerning requiring party affiliation before candidates are required to file for office. And so just some debate or conversation as to why we would force the people of Wyoming to select a party and affiliate with that party before knowing the slate of candidates for which they would be voting for. That's the issue that we're being asked. That's the policy question for the people of Wyoming. I know I've heard a lot of debate about it from the constituents. I know there's lots of concern about cheating, but really this time frame about having the deadline be before candidates file for office is the issue. So the debate for the years has been when that should be. Why is it that this bill draft and the proponents of this bill draft want the people of Wyoming to affiliate with the party before they know the candidates that will be on the ballot that they will receive. Why is that good policy?
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I maintain that that's bad policy. Frankly, it's the timing issue that's a big problem with me and why I was the only no vote in committee on this bill. The timing is an issue prior to having to announce your filing. It's just what it's going to do, and I've spoken to many people in my district, and my district probably is a little bit more liberal than most of your districts, except maybe my good friends here. But 35% of my district, frankly, are not of the majority party. And I know when I ran this last year in my primary, or in my primary election, I targeted homes of the majority party, of my party. And when I went to the door, lo and behold, that person was not of my party. I said, but you're registered as my party. And they said, well, yeah, because it doesn't behoove me to register as another party because I know I am going to be voting for that party. And if now we put the date that far ahead where no one knows who's going to be running, they're going to simply, folks who are not in the majority party, simply going to register as a majority party, and then they're never going to change, okay? So if you want a single party system here in this state with everybody in it, whether they're R's or D's or unaffiliated or whatever, constitutional, libertarian, whatever, they're all going to be registered in the Republican Party. Frankly, I think that's bad policy. And two, I've had a lot of my unaffiliated folks say, I'm just being disenfranchised by having to make this decision prior to the time that we're showing in this bill. I just really believe that that's not good for my constituents, because my constituents, yes, 2/3 are the same party I am, but a full 1/3 are not my party, but they're still my constituents, and I need to respect that, and I need to stand up for their rights as well. I just don't think the majority party wants all of these other members in their party. But if we pass this, I think that's what we're going to get. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason why it's good policy is because I'll give you a hypothetical. And Mr. Chairman, can we use proper names of parties since this bill deals specifically with the parties, so we don't have to play the euphemism game? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So I don't have to come up with elephants and jackasses. So here's a hypothetical and why we see this and why this bill's needed. So if you know who's on the ballot in a primary election and say that person is a solid Republican, votes with the platform all the time, true blue Republicans say, and then the Democrats aren't going to cross over to affect that election. If there's two conservatives going at it, they're not going to play in that primary. They're not going to come over, take the time to switch party affiliations to affect the outcome of that primary, because they're going to get a conservative no matter what. Where it does happen is where you have a liberal, even a former Democrat, up to the point of filing, they'll switch party affiliation to run in a Republican primary against a conservative Republican. Now you've got a competitive primary between a liberal Democrat and a conservative Republican in a Republican primary. Of course, the Democrats it's going to incentivize them to switch over, change their party affiliation to play in a Republican primary to affect the outcome of that race and vote for the liberal Democrat and drag them across the finish line, where otherwise that liberal Democrat would not win a Republican primary, but not for the Democrats that changed party affiliation, not because they had a change of heart and decided, you know what? I agree with the Republican platform. I really am a Republican. I want to vote in the Republican primary. That's not why they do it, Mr. Chairman. They do it to affect the outcome of those races where you have a liberal versus a conservative. They're going to support the liberal every time. It's not when there's two conservatives duking it out. It's not when it's uncontested. It's only in those races. That's why you move it before the nominating period ends, so you don't know. So it takes all that activity out of the equation and leaves it only for people that have truly changed minds. They want to change their party affiliation. Go for it. Thank you.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to point out, and we haven't heard this yet, what is the purpose of a primary election? The purpose of a primary election is for a party to develop a nominee to run in the general election. To develop their nominee to run in the general election. It's not an election warm-up. It's not, let's see who's going to run and then I'll decide what party I'm in. That's the sole purpose of it. And you could register as a blue unicorn and still vote for anybody you wanted to in the general. So I would just remind everybody the purpose of the primary isn't necessarily about who's in it and where my belief structure is. It's about the party developing a nominee for the general election, which anybody can vote for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think we have, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, let's think for a minute of what the purpose of an election in our democratic society. It's where the people get to choose who's going to represent them. The executive branch, the legislative branch. It's how a free people governs itself. The situation we have, Mr. Chairman, in our state right now is that a lot of the time, the only contest in the election is in the Republican primary. And under those circumstances, that's the time, the place the people get to make a choice. And Mr. Chairman, I'm particularly concerned about not the ones that are registered as Republicans or Democrats, but the larger number of people who are registered as unaffiliated, because this bill will prevent them from voting in the primary election. And where it turns out that the races they care about, the only contest, once you get through the nominating process and the filing process, well, not the only contest you're going to have, is in the Republican primary. And people register as unaffiliated, Mr. Chairman, for all kinds of reasons. A lot of people in some of my district, there's a fair amount of people that move around a lot in the oil business. They come into Wyoming from elsewhere, and when they register to vote, they don't know our local politics, and they register unaffiliated until they have their feet in the ground and understand what the local parties stand for, what the local situation is. They're the people that are getting disenfranchised. And I submit to you that what this bill does is eliminate a significant part of our population from participating in the election that actually selects who's going to represent them. Mr. Chairman, that is flat dead wrong. I'm against the bill.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to bring us back to home base here for a second. This is a primary, which is political. And I'll just say that the failure of one party or the success of another party is up to that party. In this particular case, we're talking about a process where we pick nominees to go into the general election. And I've heard this and I'm surprised because I've had a hard time wrapping my arms around people that want to game the system, which is what it is. You want to be part of a particular party, the Republican Party, have at it. Democratic Party, have at it. That's the primary. Like it or not, that's the setup for the primary. That is what its purpose is. Then all folks vote in the general. If you're not part of a party, I think it's a bit disingenuous for you to jump aboard that party and influence a party outcome. I mean, you game the system. And obviously, this will not take care of people permanently changing party affiliation. It won't. But it will go a long ways into addressing this issue in the state of Wyoming. And it will effectively make a change. I can't accept somebody saying, oh, this is okay. This is okay because I don't get a voice. Well, join a party. I mean, I'm not the one, make your own party, make Jim's party. I don't care. But join a party. Don't circumvent a political process in some red herring story about it disenfranchises people. No, it doesn't disenfranchise anybody. You get to vote in the general election, and that is the process. We become so accustomed to people using our process in another way. And I think this bill's a long time coming. It's not perfect, but it does go a certain way in solving this issue and talking about it openly. And I stand in support of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wonder what the purpose of our elections are. We had a discussion about that on a resolution we had here a few days ago about, are we a democracy? Are we a representative democracy? Are we a Republican form of government? And I look and I think, well, I think the important thing about our election process is that the people get to choose their candidates. They get to decide who represents them. That's the goal. That's what, the Constitution, that's what we swore our oath to. I don't think this is about that, Mr. Chairman. Does anybody doubt the influence of parties in our elections? Our founding fathers, they kind of broke into the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, but they didn't envision parties. And some spoke really solidly against parties, thinking it would be a bad development. And we have a situation where one party is very successful in Wyoming. Look at the makeup of this chamber. Out of 31 members, all but 2 are members of the Republican Party in Wyoming, since we're using the name. I don't really like using the majority party, let's say that. All 5 of our elected officials, Mr. Chairman, are members of that majority party. All of our congressional delegation are members of that Republican Party and have been for as long as I can almost remember. So it's a very successful party. Mr. Chairman, I don't understand why a party is that successful can't stand on its success. Why do we have to go the next step and crush people's voices in the process? Because we have a primary system that sort of is partly in the party realm and partly in law. It's kind of a weird system in Wyoming, actually. We don't just have caucuses where parties do things. Parties have to follow the law in the election code. Primary elections are odd little creatures. The turnout's lower. They're heavily partisan. But does anyone ever doubt, based on the makeup of this chamber, the offices downstairs and the offices in Washington and state offices or county offices clear across our state, that the winner of the winner of the majority party's primary goes on to win the election 99.9% of the time? That's a pretty high success ratio. But who's driving that partisan experience? I submit to you, Mr. Chairman, that it's a minority of people. Someplace between 10 and 30% that are pretty hardcore, rah, 80% or better Republican platform people, majority party platform people. That's not very representative. That's not very conducive to a governance based on representation in a democratic fashion. Not at all. Does anybody doubt that this is any more than a consolidation of power within that 10 to 30%? I submit to you that it is. And Mr. Chairman, I submit to you that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is corruption. It stomps out the voice of others. It eliminates their chance to be effective in the ballot box. When you look at major polling on major issues, the people of Wyoming and even the people in that majority party feel a different way. They're not winning this contest based on ideas, based on having the best ideas and moving them forward. They're winning by gaming the rules that have served Wyoming well, served Wyoming so well that 29 members of this Senate are members of that party. 5 top statewide elected officials in our 3 congressional delegation. This is a bad bill, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill that takes and destroys the voices that live in my district. I stand here for them, Mr. Chairman, the people of the minority party, the moderate folks that don't subscribe to everything in the majority party's platform, the independent voters that wish to choose which primary they participate in. I stand for them. I stand for a system of government that is representative of the people of a whole. I stand by my oath to the Constitution, and I submit to you that this is unconstitutional because this prohibits the people's right to assemble. First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech, one form of which is to express yourself through a party, or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble. That's what we do in elections. We assemble with the party. We vote in elections. This is a repugnant bill by a small minority of people that wish to control the outcome, not of the primary, because that's a foregone conclusion. They want to control the people's voices in November, and that's just wrong.
Senator Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be brief. Just my thoughts on this is crossover voting benefits one party, the Democrats. I don't think we see a lot of Republicans crossing over to vote the other way. So in that sense, it's unfair when one party is the one that's getting the benefit of it. And lastly, the disenfranchised, unaffiliated voters, to a good colleague from Natrona County, that's a choice that they make. I mean, they don't have to be unaffiliated. So, they put themselves in that position and they don't have to. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the bill.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise for a couple of reasons. Fully aware of the fact that it's really not the debate anymore. In the old days, you used to debate something and then you'd vote. And I understand completely now that we vote somewhere else, maybe a couple of days ago, and then we come in here for a debate, but it's really just the opportunity to get on the record, right? Because is there anybody going to change their mind today? I didn't think so. So I wanted to let you know, though, given what was just stated, that just simply isn't true. I had a good friend in the 90s who ran for governor, and there were hundreds of the Republican Party who crossed over to make sure that that governor became governor, and he did. So this has been going on for a long time, and we all know that what really brought it to a head was we had a fine gentleman move to our state not long ago, wonderful person, lucky enough to know his family well and work with them. But he decided after being here 6 or 8 years that he wanted to run for the highest office in our state, and he did. And good for him, ran a heck of a campaign, but he lost to one of our longtime ranchers. And that's when the trumpets sounded, and we ended up with this coined phrase, this fabricated problem, which we've called crossover voting since then. I was chairman of the Corporations Committee, I think, when the first bill arrived here a few years ago. It didn't pass then because it was a bad bill then, and this one's a bad bill also. Mr. Chairman, I'm really rising today to be on the record to support my voters back home, because there's a whole bunch of them that think this is a really bad idea. And I just want them to know that I'm standing up in support of them. At the very least, if we're going to pass a bill like this, you've got to give people an opportunity to know who's running for office before you lock them out. This is a really bad bill. We dug it out of the recycle bin to get it up here, so I think we all know there must be a foregone conclusion here, but this is a really bad bill to pass. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hutchins.
Mr. Chair, when I read this, I'm seeing something totally different than my fellows, and I know the good president mentioned crossover voting, and I think he did so, and I could be wrong, as an example. And sometimes when we bring our legislation forward, we use an example to just try to give you an idea what could happen. But when I look at it, I think about, wow, I want to join a party, and it's telling me I have to do so by a certain date. And I'm going to choose the party that is more in alignment with my values, so on and so forth. I could care less who's going to run. That shouldn't even be in my mind, at least in my mind, it shouldn't. It's what's going on in that party that I want to belong to. And I think that's what the bill is saying we want to do, is if you want to join a major party, you have to do so by a certain date. And if I don't know what that party stands for, then maybe I shouldn't join that party. So that's the way I see this. I don't see anything really nefarious. I just see it as simply what it says it is. You come in, you register to vote on a certain day, and it even gives you an option to change that. So sometime down the line, if you decide, wow, I don't like the Democrat Party, I don't like the Republican Party, I can change it. And I think that's good to have those choices. So that's what's on my mind, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I stand before you today, Mr. Chairman, as a person who I can honestly say in my entire life has never switched over to vote on election day. Frankly, the reason's simple. I was always afraid that while I was walking to the voting chair there that I'd fall over dead, and then in my obituary it would say, my career Republican died today. And I just couldn't take that, and so I never have done it. But I just wanted to just make sure now that I don't have any real skin in that game. Sorry, Senator Ellis. But I guess I just having an issue with the idea that we have to decide before we know who the candidates are in an election about what party we're going to be in. I have run a number of times. We've run some, won some, and lost some. But one of the things I'm most proud of when I run is when people in the other party came over and say, boy, I voted for you. And I know when I raise money, I always raise more money from folks in the other party. So I always felt pretty good about that too. So I've always kind of thought about this as kind of a nonpartisan thing with me as far as that goes. I have what I feel are strong democratic values, but I'm also a businessman. A lot of people think that's weird. But once again, you can't pigeonhole these things. And what this bill does is it, in my view, pigeonholes an entire segment of people. It disenfranchises ones that aren't affiliated with any party, and then pigeonholes all the rest in one way or another in a neat little box concocted by someone for some reason that none of us who got elected had to go through. Another thing that strikes me odd, why would you change something that worked for everyone in this room? That just strikes me as odd. But I guess in another way, when I think about it, as the party that's in the vast minority in the state, by disenfranchising a big number of voters and pigeonholing the rest, the day when my party will ascend to a more lofty place than it is now will come sooner with the passage of this bill. And once again, since we know how the vote's going to go down, I think we know how that's going to happen. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, just sharing those thoughts with you. Thanks.
I would like to remind the body, we do have a couple amendments to talk about too. So Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill will eliminate crossover voting, as I mentioned earlier. And be careful what you ask for, because if you put this bill into effect, there won't be anybody crossing over because everybody's going to register. Unaffiliated people will register as Democrats, or as Republicans. Democrats will register as Republicans. There'll be no incentive for them to shift back, right? They're going to know come the next election, I'm not going to know who's going to run, but we know that will probably, the races will be in the Republican primary, at least for the foreseeable future. So they're not going to cross back. I've already run into people in my district who do this now, and this date is not in place. The minute we pass this bill, there's no incentive for anybody to cross over anymore. They're all just going to register Republican. If that's what you want, fine. We will have a one-party system here. And everybody, no matter what they ideologically feel like, whether they're Democrats, whether they're Republicans, whether they're unaffiliated or what have you, they're going to be Republicans because this bill is forcing them to do that in order to have a voice. So I just have to tell you, this bill will stop crossover voting, but be careful what you ask for.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We beat this dead horse. The horse is dead for sure, but I'm going to throw a few more things on because the saddle's still on the horse. Anyway, I've voted against this bill every time it's come down the pike. One year, we actually had an amendment to change the date, and I voted for the amendment. I would have voted for the bill had that stayed in, but I'm not going to vote for a bill where the date is May 1st and we don't even know who is actually up. I'm a Republican. I'll always be a Republican, but there's so many people out there that are somewhere in the middle, as has been mentioned by a number of people, that are either independents or unaffiliated, and they really do like to vote for a person. But how are you going to get to make that decision when May 1st is the cutoff and you haven't even had people sign up? I want to hear them, just like I think a lot of other people. I want to hear them on the campaign trail. I want to see what kinds of things they're going to push. I want to see what they're, when they put a newspaper ad in, what they're all about. You know, and then at least I'm going to vote for, you know, someone that's a person I know. And it doesn't matter to me if they're ultra conservative or a little bit conservative or somewhere, you know, in between all that. I want to see and know who's running. And so honestly, if the dates were changed on this, if it was further into the season, I don't even care. June, August, you know, before, a couple weeks before maybe absentee, you know, I could jump on board. But the biggest thing I think, number one, is if this is the number one priority for, you know, the Wyoming GOP, I'm saddened by that, because I think there's so many other issues in this state that are so much more important than this, things that we need to take care of for our constituents, you know, property taxes, on and on and on. So many things, inflation and so forth. I don't think this is the number one priority for me, at least, on and against this bill.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to offer some numbers of what I see when I look at my district. After looking at the numbers through the primary, I think that you can look at some of the data from the Secretary of State's website about the number of registered the number of registered people from the minority party, the number from the majority party. But in one of the House districts contained in the Senate district that I have the honor of representing, in the primary, there were 1,359 ballots cast for the majority party candidate, with about 62 write-ins and 300 undervotes. So about 1,700 ballots cast on the majority side. On the minority side, there were two candidates, two really qualified, great candidates. One person got 162 votes, the other person got 90. So in essence, looking at their undervotes and other write-ins, 260 people from the minority party voted to decide who was going to be their candidate in that race. When it got to the election, much tighter race. The majority candidate won 1,145 votes to 1,013, a difference of 132 votes. So when I look at my district and you have two candidates, it's a pretty purple district, I'd argue, leaning slightly red. But just looking at those numbers, how's that fair to those minority party candidates that got their race decided by 260 votes? Just something to think about.
President Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm probably going to wander around because my mind's gone way too many places. I'm one of the ones that's been on this bill forever. I'm a hardcore Republican, have been all my life. Interestingly enough, I'm going to look at all you folks and tell you I'm disenfranchised from the state party, that they chose not to have me be a part of them. Yet I'm still in favor of this, solidly in favor of it. And my deal is this: they're a partisan primary for a reason. They choose their own people. And whether my party's disenfranchised me or not, I can look you in the eye and tell you they have. I went to them and asked for their support, and they told me no. That's interesting. Should I be bitter? Should I want to change the dates? I don't think so. It's about Republican values. This bill's good. It makes sense. And if you only have two candidates and they only had 250 votes, what about the third party that only has 12 candidates? Folks, these things write themselves. As you go through, and we're acting like this is changing the earth, I encourage you to go back and pull up statute books. From statehood, this section of the law has bounced back and forth and back and forth. This is not the first change on it. Won't be the last. I just came out of being chair of Corporations Committee, and we looked at kind of the blend that everybody's talking about that doesn't like this bill. We looked at some really evil things like runoff elections, ranked choice. That's really kind of what you break down to when you throw everybody in a pot and you do it. There's a reason that we have a party system, and it's values. And if your values mean that you want to run across the street and change them so that you can vote for somebody or change it, maybe you ought to take a look at it. You know, for me, I'll be a pigeon in that pigeonhole deal. I'm fine with it, even though I'm not in the middle of it. It's still the party I'm a part of. I choose. I think it'll move my way at some point in time, and if it doesn't, I can tell you this, for all of you who are talking about going to one system, what this will lead to, if you're correct, is someone will emerge on the other side, because it's so easy to get on, and then you're running against the other end of it. And, you know, from my end of it, there's no harm in this. You're not going to find it's a disaster. For the people that are running back and forth, that's really what you have screaming is the people that want to change. And maybe they ought to have to make a choice of what party they want to be a part of, because it really is a partisan primary. Like I said, maybe it's foregone, maybe it's not. I'm one of the ones on this one. I think we actually change debates on the floor, folks. Don't assume it's preconceived or preordained where we're at. But it's not as evil as anybody thinks it is either. Thank you.
Senator Hicks.
I mean, I'm not going to belabor this, but, you know, the idea that if we have a single party that the state will fall apart or something just doesn't resonate with the facts. The fact is while we are a majority of the majority in the Republican Party, we're not the most single party state in the nation, Mr. President. In fact, we have the 50th state in the nation that has a much more higher, and at one time it was 100% of one party, the other party. And they didn't fall apart, and the system didn't come apart, and people weren't disenfranchised. That's the nature of the people that they represented. And today, Mr. Chairman, even today, just go look at the 50th state in the union. They are more of a single party dominated legislature, top 5 than the state of Wyoming. We're not number 1. I can guarantee you that our system's not going to fall apart if we become a little more Republican, Mr. President or Mr. Chairman. So, you know, let's look at what it really does. It doesn't change anybody. It just says you have to make a decision earlier in the process. That's what it does. You know, we wouldn't have this bill if the majority wasn't disenfranchised right now, Mr. Chairman. So on and for the bill.
Senator Dockstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some in-depth debate here today on this. I come from a little different angle on this. You know how you go home and people will ask about, well, what about this bill or that, because they've been tracking certain popular topics. Over the years, the last few years especially, this has been a topic that I hear about when I go home. You ask, did it get passed? Some version of it? I have to say no. I think the only thing that surpassed this was the property taxes we're still trying to do. Hopefully we'll find a solution to that before you leave here. That's all you'll hear about. But folks, this one I hear about. I go home, they say, what about that? We get the party affiliation taken care of, we get that. And I said, no, not this year, not this year. But so that's why I supported it in a very unusual process. Granted, we brought it out of committee because I knew I had support from home for it. And that's why I'm going to be supporting the bill on the floor now. This is what I'm asked about on a repetitive basis. Did we get the correction made? On and for the bill.
Senator Case.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Good debate here. Let's leave Wyoming for a minute and journey across our country, our nation, Mr. Chairman. We have seen increased polarization. I think that was an allusion or alluded to in the last comments by my good friend from Carbon County, that other states are going the other way on the blue side of the world, Mr. Chairman. Some states are going this way on the red side of the world. I don't like where this is going. I don't like for there to be those kind of states against these kind of states, and everything is polarized, and our nation is suffering, greatly suffering by the polarization in this country. I don't like that, Mr. Chairman. I hope we're going to do something about it. And I think, and I submit to you, that as politics across the country and in the state of Wyoming have become more polarized, more tipped one way or the other, what suffered is our government, our civility, our humbleness to the people.
We do have a committee of the whole. Is Senator Nethercott.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just wanted, the debate's not over. There are amendments, I think, to move. But as a point, I'm proud of the debate that we're having. Historically, this bill has passed through this chamber absent debate. And I find that disappointing, because this is one of the most important bills we're actually going to vote on, even though there's no appropriation attached to it, and one that we've heard before, because it deals with the people's right to vote, right? Nothing more fundamental. And we control that. We're going to control how they vote and dictate those terms. So, I mean, imagine that power we have right now. As a woman in Wyoming, I feel it, and I'm blessed by it, humbled by it. But recognize the significance of what we're doing. And if we're really doing what we want to be doing, I'm going to vote for this, just so you know. I think in a legislature in future years, they'll be undoing it. Why? Because the other party will be in control or power. Just like the good president said, if you look at the history of these bills, this issue, it vacillates back and forth. Why? Because it's not a solution. I believe there's groupthink that believes it is a solution. I think it's all about satisfying a call to arms based on a perceived solution that will occur. I believe it's false. I look forward to seeing that come to fruition. As a lifelong Republican, as a lifelong generational Republican, I have no doubt that it will. I look forward to voting aye. We'll see it through. But again, I don't think it will achieve the results that are sought. Let's entertain it.
Senator Rothfuss? Will you, reading clerk, will you please read in Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1?
House Bill 103, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, page 1, line 3 after.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 103, and would really appreciate the body's favorable consideration and thoughtfulness on this. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the debate, and I certainly do see both sides. I understand both sides, and I understand this issue. It's one we've been debating for many years now. The concern I bring and the concern that this amendment attempts to remedy really is at the foundation and at the heart of the debate that we're having, which is that political parties do have differences of opinions. And while this legislation may be consistent with and in the interest of the current majority party, it turns out that not all political parties share an interest in having an election based on allegiance to a party rather than commitment to an individual or a person and their skills, their knowledge, their expertise, and their personal values. Mr. Chairman, what this legislation does is it says we don't care who the individual is that's going to be on the ballot. It doesn't matter. What we care about is the party and allegiance to the party. So we move through this legislation, the registration date back prior to even knowing who's going to be on the ballot, because why would we need to know that? And if that's the choice of the members of the majority party, I'll respect that. I won't like it, but I'll respect that. But it is not the choice of the minority party to exclude registration, to exclude association, or to exclude the constitutional right to assembly at any point. This amendment just allows us, the minority party, and not just us, but the other minor parties, even the majority party, if they so choose, to opt out of this particular policy, to allow registration and association at any point. One of the values of the minority party is participation, is democracy, is the ability to bring on board a difference of views, of viewpoints, as well as a desire to look at the expertise of the individual and to weigh the individuals. Mr. Chairman, I understand that it is the intent of the majority party, those sponsors of this bill, to exclude minority membership from the primary. But, Mr. Chairman, you're all invited. You're all invited to the minority primary because we see it as an open process. We see it as an open election, and we see it consistent with the spirit of Wyoming Article 1, Section 27, elections free and equal. Elections shall be open, free, and equal, and no power, civil or military, shall at any time interfere to prevent an untrammeled exercise of the right of suffrage. Everyone's invited. If it's an election, you're all invited. So, if there is a desire to opt to exclude certain persons, to keep the tent small, to keep people out, to keep the bloodline pure among the majority party, so be it if that's the way the vote goes. This amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I hope everyone will vote for it, and everyone will respect the interest of this minority party. And remember, we represent 25% of the votes of the state with only 2 of us here in this free and fair election system. 25% of the state, and yet 2 arrived. Strange how the system arrives at that particular outcome. But again, it's the system we have in place. I would ask you, Mr. Chairman, to join me in supporting this amendment. You can see it's very simple. It adds a paragraph C that would allow members of other parties, the chairman of those other parties, whether it's the minority party or one of the minor parties, to file with the Secretary of State's office to say, no, we're going to keep our registration open. We're going to let anyone in. If you like our candidates, come join us. If you don't, stay where you are. This is about ensuring that we have representation consistent with our interests if the majority party is trying to maintain representation of their own interests. On and for the amendment, I would appreciate all of your support in recognizing that not all parties view this problem the same way, and not all parties put allegiance to party over allegiance to democracy or allegiance to the individual. Thank you.
Discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing no discussion. You have heard the motion on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 103. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. No. The chair is in doubt, so we'll go ahead and do a standing. All those in favor of the amendment number 1 to House Bill 103, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 103 has failed by a vote of 12 to 18. We are on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2. Senator Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, if I could have the amendment read in, please.
House Bill 103, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2, page 3, line 9, after.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to House Bill 103 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, as you know, this bill has been seen twice in Committee number 7. And each time I ask the sponsors of the bill to answer one question based on the drafting of the bill. Why do we care if there's a lockout period or a time between the primary election and the general election where someone is prohibited from changing their party? So this bill basically strikes that prohibition before the general election. Changes nothing with the primary. The bill stands as it is. But for the general election, it removes that 14-day period that somebody cannot change their party. Mr. Chairman, if I understood the debate today on the floor is, it's all pointed toward the primary. So why would we have another time for the general where somebody could not change their party affiliation? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to answer that. As being a sponsor of this a few times, I had that similar question, and it turns out the existing statute, the 14 days, is so the county clerks have time to prepare for the election. That's why they cut it off at 14 days. That's what I've been told. So the current law allows you to same day change your affiliation, but that lockout period was for the county clerks to be able to get their ducks in a row. So that's why that was there. That's what I've been told. So on and against the amendment, I think we need to leave the current 14 days. That's the way it's always been. I think we should leave it, and so we don't have any unintended consequences with the county clerks being able to conduct the elections.
Any other discussion? Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's the first explanation I've heard of that from the sponsors. And like I said, I've heard this bill twice in committee. Maybe it came up in the committee that heard it most recently. Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully say that I'm pretty confident our clerks can handle it. I'm pretty confident they can handle it. If you register before the general election, you can declare a party. Are we talking about an onslaught? Is that what we're talking about? Crossover voting? We're concerned about that for the general election? That's what this bill is about, right? That's what I heard. So I'm confident that our county clerks can handle it. On and for the amendment. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Senator Hicks.
Chairman, just a question on the amendment, the way I read that, when you go into, and we're on committee, the whole amendment number 2, you go in there and you put a period after election. But it leaves the balance of that line on, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Nope, it doesn't. I'm on the wrong line. I withdraw my question.
Any other discussion? Question being called. You've heard the motion on committee of the whole amendment number 2 to House Bill 103. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
The motion has failed. Division being called. All those in favor of amendment number 2 to House Bill 103, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to House Bill 103 has failed by a vote of 14 to 16. Is there any more discussion on this bill?
Question.
Question being called. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the bill, and a couple of points that weren't raised that I just wanted to point out regarding crossover and the statistics. The belief that this will actually stop any type of crossover voting, I think, is ill-placed. And the reality is, when you look at the statistics right now, as I mentioned previously, about 25% of the vote tends to go to the minority, about 75% tends to go to the majority in statewide elections. Registration numbers are close to about 13% minority, and the balance other parties, a lot of unaffiliated and obviously the majority party. That's not a coincidence. And when you look at the change in registration, all of about 1,000 people, about 1%, less, well, maybe up to 1%, but not even 1% of registered voters actually shifted after the previous election. So this is a circumstance where maybe that 1% maybe get stopped from shifting back, but the reality is they just won't go back. But those individuals that might be contemplating switching over a little bit earlier, they're going to have to shift earlier. And honestly, it's the right thing to do. This isn't nefarious. I understand that if there's a belief that party loyalty is more important than democracy or the individual, that I understand the sentiment of protecting the club, protecting the team. That's not what's in the mind of most voters that are crossing over. They're not doing it to meddle. They're not doing it to be nefarious. Crossover voters are trying to vote for candidates that are in their best interests, the best interest of their families, the best interests of their careers and jobs, the best interests of what they want for the future of themselves in the state of Wyoming. Nobody's trying to pull a fast one on anyone. We have a constitutional right to vote, and you can comb through the Wyoming Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. You're not going to find anything about primary partisan elections. Parties are clubs. It's like an angry chess club. That's what a party is. We have somehow elevated them and exalted these parties to the point where they become a part of government and they're enshrined in government. But Mr. Chairman, it's a club. And if we wanted to separate the clubs from the government, and then we can have secret handshakes and we can have quiet elections in back rooms, it's certainly reasonable to take that approach. But the idea that the state of Wyoming as a public election will hold exclusive elections on behalf of political parties at their request is a little bit of a stretch for how an independent democratic government is supposed to be working with regard to these clubs. And we don't think about that a lot because we sort of inherited this system. But I guess I would challenge everyone. I know that I'm not going to change any votes here. But as we go home, as we drift off to sleep tonight, I guess I'd ask everyone to give some thought to this. Why in the world are political parties enshrined in our statutes, funded by our government through appropriation to hold the elections for them, to the exclusion of others? That's a pretty awkward club. If that were a chess club, we'd probably be offended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you're ready to vote, but again, as this issue is so important, I just want to share with the body that within the last 5 minutes, I've received 3 emails from random constituents. One, a member of the party who's demanding I vote for the bill, on the edge of his seat, listening intently. And 2 other constituents have expressed their clear disappointment of me, how wrong it is for me to make a statement with my vote. Those are my constituents in this district who care and are listening very carefully. I have certainly received my fair share of threats about support for me on election issues the past year, and have voted for this year, or for this bill and this topic multiple times for 7 years. I urge the voters of Wyoming and my district to recognize that fact, that this bill comes forward multiple times every year. I have voted on it multiple times every year. But it is a good question that the senator from the ivory tower raises, that I would like an answer to the question on, because my constituents would like to know. I'm here to serve them. Why is it that state dollars, taxpayer dollars, go to fund these private nonprofit party elections, whether it be Democrats or Republicans? So a question about that, and whether or not that is a Republican value for dollars to be spent in that way. Again, this is really one of the first times we're having a substantive debate on this topic, and there are a lot of constituents listening to this debate now. So those in favor of this, I would like to hear an answer to that. My constituents would like to hear an answer to that, if we can, please.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll speak to that issue, because that's not the bill that was brought before us today. If we want to get rid of that, that comes as a bill form. Somebody brings that, and we can do that. But and this has been a good debate, Mr. Chairman. But that's not the bait on the bill. And so I've listened to this, and we've strayed off subject, probably me included just a little bit. But I'm going to bring us back now and say our job is to debate the bill, not all these other things associated with that. So I think the question and the answer to, I would say to my colleagues, people out there, if that is an issue, that is a burning issue that we're funding partisan elections, then we should, somebody, if that is their constituents and they feel this is a high priority, we have a process called the bill process, and that's how we address that, Mr. Chairman. But I would encourage everybody, we've got a lot of work to do here the rest of the weeks, folks. Let's try to keep our comments more narrowly focused back on the bill. I do think it's been a very robust debate, and I think it's been good for the body. But I'm just cognizant of the guy that has to manage the clock here a little bit, Mr. Chairman, that we can debate this and really start to stray off quite a ways. So with that, if we can just keep our debate more narrowly focused, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Any other discussion? Looks like President Driscoll.
Quick, I can answer the club debate. It's a pretty easy one. It's what we do on the federal level. It's exactly what we do. The primary system is a carbon copy of what we do on the federal. The dates are different, but it's what we do. We've been trained how to do it. We got a president from one party. We've got a candidate from the other party. They duke it out. They go through it. The problem we don't have in Wyoming, or we do have in Wyoming, is we don't have candidates from another party that show up. We almost had a third party show up. And I think, it's a reflection on what people do. This body will change somewhere in the next 100 years. It will not look like it does today. They'll go back to what the good senator in the corner talked about, and they'll change it back. But for right now, it's the way it is. I will make one last statement, and I'm a co-sponsor on this bill. I'm voting for it. The process that this bill came on was wrong. This is a part of the bill, by the way, in case you think I'm getting off of it. It was wrong. It was a failed bill. I will never, ever vote yes on a bill, whether I'm on it or not again, should one ever come out this way again. I think it's bad policy, and it's a bad way to go about it. Just a fair warning from me. We started a bad precedent with this bill, should not continue.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we want to get to a vote. Just a couple of final thoughts. And the first one is, I've ridden the range down here with the gentleman that just spoke for a long, long time, and really consider him one of the best friends ever. We disagree on this issue, but that doesn't change a darn thing of anything. But Mr. Chairman, I forgot to mention that during committee, when the first committee did consider this, referencing what the president just talked about, I wanted to explain to the body that I was chairing a different committee that day on behalf of the Senate, and was unable to be there. And so I was the one who was marked as an excused vote. Just to let you know, I would have voted against this bill. And today I will do the same. And really, the reason is this. There is not one clerk in our state who can ever find a time that this issue changed an election. Not once. This is a solution looking for a problem that does not exist. And that's why I would have voted against it in committee. That's why I'm going to vote against it today, Mr. Chairman. It kind of follows the playbook. You fabricate something and you get it all stirred up and people get to frothing at the mouth. But guess what? It's not even a problem. It hasn't ever changed an election in Wyoming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator DeKalb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guarantee it did change an election. I was directly associated with it in Sweetwater, in the area of the Sweetwater. It did change. Now, is it going to permanently be, like that in the future? No. But in my corner of the state, it is an active issue. And it's just recently kind of moved over to the other side. So it is an issue, and I will stand and testify to that. Another thing in this room, I just like to say, yeah, most of us are Republicans, but we're all different. We come from different parts of the state with different constituencies. My constituency is the grassroots of where I come from. I don't get driven by the state of Wyoming GOP. I don't have any text messages from those folks. They don't tell me what to do or how to do it. I'm who I am because I choose to be that way. And the majority of the people that I represent are that way. And that's all. My good senators in this room, we're all in here for a purpose to represent our people. And that's what I will continue to do. And that's the purpose why I support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do understand that everyone would like to stop debating this in an effort to continue to disenfranchise about 25% of the state, but I'm going to go ahead, Mr. Chairman, and speak one more time against that. A couple of points were raised that I think are worth addressing. One, the presidential election, I think, is a poignant thought. How does that work? Differently. It works differently. And we all probably have various complaints about the presidential system, but notice it's a closed private party primary for each major party and minor parties. They all write their rules. They do their own thing. They have internal election processes. It literally is a case in point for how that's theoretically supposed to be done when you're carrying out an internal private party election, caucuses, whatever else the case may be. And of course, both parties have gripes about their systems and super delegates and all of the other challenges that have gone on over the years. Yeah, it's an interesting system, but at the end of the day, it's intentionally separated from the state government process, recognizing that the party is the nominator of the presidential candidate, and then it comes through the federal election process. So if we want to emulate the federal system, at least it's fair. You can have whatever process you want for in-groups and out-groups with regard to a private party, as long as you're not using those state resources. The idea that it's a different bill to discuss state resources, I agree it would take a different bill, but it's certainly on point, Mr. Chairman, because it's the idea of excluding Wyoming citizens from participating in a state-funded election. That's what this bill tries to do. It tries to exclude Wyoming citizens from access to a publicly funded election to the greatest degree possible. If you want to be able to exclude citizens, it shouldn't be publicly funded. And it would be fine if it were privately funded. It would be fine if it were that club instead of a state-sanctioned party. So it is directly on point, it's relevant, and it's a reason to vote against this bill, because state funds should not be used to facilitate parties, clubs. And Mr. Chairman, one last point. I do think it's important for the public that may be listening that may not understand the process, because the process that the president pointed out is important. This bill died once. This zombie bill that came back from one committee, having been voted down in that committee, that was then transferred to another committee to be brought back to life for discussion here, is a pointed example of the democracy that we're aspiring towards through the bill itself. I think it's an excellent vehicle, if we're going to finally pass this bill, that it be through a duplicitous process. And a final thought, Mr. Chairman, before we go to vote on and against the bill. The idea that we do have the greatest supermajority in the country of the majority party in the state of Wyoming, with only 2 members in the chamber, and that party is fighting tooth and nail, year after year, highest priority, to reform an election system that has achieved this chamber. I guess I'd just ask, what did you all do wrong? That this supermajority is a bad outcome. I look at you all as my friends and colleagues, and it'd be disappointing to have a system that would get rid of all of you and replace you, apparently, with something that was not influenced by the evil minority party. On and against, Mr. Chairman. call for the question.
Senator Beitman.
All right, I'll continue the filibuster, Mr. Chairman. This notion that our rules are duplicitous. We just voted for our rules. The process is the process. When I came in as a freshman, I don't know how many times I heard, trust the process, it works. And I've had the process used against me multiple times, so I learned the process. Process is the process. That rule to be able to yank a bill out of a committee, a kill committee, when the majority of the body probably would vote for that bill, is there for a reason, to protect the majority. And so throwing people under the bus or questioning their motives over using the process that works for all of us. The process will work for you sometime. It'll work against me sometimes. Most of the time it works against me. Sometimes it works for me. But to impugn the process that we voted for makes us look like foolish. So I would like to put that to bed. And, let's get back to what this bill actually does. There's already a 14-day lockout period. That's for the clerks to get the voter rolls, the poll books put together. Is that disenfranchising voters? Because it's already being done now and it's been done for a long time. No, it does not disenfranchise voters. We're just trying to come to an agreement on what the appropriate cutoff date is for party switching. That's all this bill does. We're not trying to lock people out. We're not trying to disenfranchise voters. We're trying to find a realistic date that makes sense for political parties to cut off crossover voting, say this is the date we're going to stop it. It opens up on this date. You can switch after this date. That's what we're debating. Let's stick to the debate. Thank you. On and for the bill.
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Beitman's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with recommendation that House Bill number 103 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. No. Chair is in doubt. All those in favor, say stand, please. All those opposed, please stand. House Bill 103 has passed the committee of the whole. Votes were 20-11. We are on the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 59. Reading clerk, will you please read the bill?
House Bill 59 engrossed, Wyoming National Guard tuition benefits, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, an act relating to defense forces and affairs. It was referred to committee number 8, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Kolb, acting chairman. Was re-referred to committee number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, chairman.
Chairman Boner, you have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Yeah, it's been a while.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 59. To explain this bill, we'll refer to my colleague from Albany County.
Senator Furphy.
Mr. Chairman, this bill came out of interim Joint Transportation Highway Affairs Committee. It's pretty simple bill. Looks a little long, but if you'll turn to page 2 of the bill, the essence of the whole bill is that, first of all, the National Guard members were surveyed asking for what benefits they'd like to see happen, because as you all know, we're having trouble retaining these National Guard members. And this bill is what they really wanted to do. So if you look at page 2, basically it says, provides payment for higher education assistance, tuition, mandatory fees for active members of the National Guard, or, this is the key for this whole bill, for the spouse or dependents of active members of the Wyoming National Guard. And it's basically trying to, if you look on page 3, it said, if they want these benefits, they have to commit to an enlistment contract or other written agreement to remain in the Guard for no less than 6 years to provide those benefits. If you go through the rest of the bill, it just reiterates this plan, and it also allows a National Guard member themselves, if they get 1 degree, they can apply for a 2nd degree if they make an additional commitment for 6 years to the Guard. If you turn to page 8, this is one of the keys. There's at the top of page 8, there's appropriated $745,529 from the general fund to fund this tuition assistance program. And if you turn to page 9, there's appropriated $109,412 from the general fund to the Wyoming Military Department for information technology expenses to implement this act. That's the gist of the bill. I'll try to answer any question, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that House Bill number 59 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. House Bill 59 has passed the committee of the whole. Our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 89. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 89 engrossed, State Investment Returns Adequate Reserve Funding, sponsored by the Capital Finance Committee, an act relating to investment of state funds. It was referred to Committee Number 2, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure?
Thank you. Sorry, I stepped on your line. Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 89. And there is a standing committee amendment. I would like it read in at this time.
House Bill 89, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 4, after.
Senator Kinski.
Mr. Chairman, I would move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 89. And folks, I will get to that amendment shortly. First, let me kind of walk you through what we're doing here, as this is one more in a continuing suite of bills that was worked on in the interim that's designed to help us make more money on our money and also to help insulate us against the volatility in our revenues. So the way we make more money is by what's called a total return strategy, which enables our investment gurus to do something more than just stick things in short-term money. So to do that, our reserve accounts need to be built up to what we're calling 7X, that is 7 times the earnings, and which in theory means if all of our income went away, we would have income stored up for 7 years. So it's a very conservative approach. It's a way to save. This is what we voted on when in the budget, when we said we're going to put as much money into those reserves to save it as possible. Once that reserve account has hit that 7X, any earnings after that go into the corpus of the account. So I'll give you, for instance, of sort of the opportunity cost. You've got an exhibit that was passed out, and this is one that really caught our eye in the interim. Opportunity costs of not doing a total return strategy. So what they did here is they took the market value of various of the funds and looked at the historic average, and then they looked at the returns, and then the far right two columns are the most telling. The one second from the left said percent difference over a 5-year period compared to the PMTF. So the PMTF is the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. And that's the one that is now invested on a total return strategy. The other funds are not. And you'll see here where under the Hathaway, it was 0.6 below the PMTF. The UPLF, I can't remember what that fund is. It was 2% ahead of it. But most important, you come down to a very large fund, the Common School Public Land Fund. It was 7.6% behind the PMTF, higher ed 10% behind, pool A 16% behind. So what the investment people looked at is they said, if we had been investing on this total return strategy over the last 5 years, we would have had an additional $370 million just from investing the money differently. So that's what this bill seeks to do. It amends the Common School Public Land Fund reserve account, the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund as a reserve account, the Hathaway, the Excellence in Higher Education accounts. So to say, one, we want these to be held inviolate. We want them to be held only for a downturn in the economy. Two, we want them to be invested on a total return strategy for a higher return. And three, our objective is to get 7 years of earnings into those funds so that we can invest them in a total return and insulate ourselves against the volatility that we know is to come from our revenue stream. So I gave you a marked up copy of HB 89, and I'd like to just briefly walk you through those amendments. Let's see, grab my copy of it here. Page 1 is just conforming. What happened in the House side is they amended in a Resource Natural Trust policy statement, investment statement, which has nothing to do with the bill, so we amended it right back out. And then the other consequential amendment in here is originally the appropriations to those reserve accounts were contained in this bill, and the advice of staff is you also had those appropriations in the budget bill. You don't need it in both places, delete it out. So with that, it ends up being actually a much shorter bill. If you go to page 4, you will see a large amount struck out, and that's where they're talking about transferring $639 million into the reserve accounts. That needs to be struck because the transfer is not happening here. On page 5, line 21, there's an amendment that says committing the funds is struck and conform by, it's a conforming amendment. By making the statutory changes, we strike committing the funds because this bill no longer does that. You go to page 6, these are the strikeouts from 5 to 7 are simply conforming amendments. And then on page 6, lines 10 down through the end, this is dealing with a method that is no longer going to be done, where we used to fund the reserve accounts with loans from the LSRA, and we are not doing that now. We are doing that by direct transfer from our federal mineral royalties. So everything through the top of page 8 is no longer necessary. Now we get into the meat of the bill on page 8. Page 8, this is the Investment Earnings Spending Policy Permanent Funds, the PMTF. And you'll see at the bottom, this is an important sentence, except for funds specified by the legislature that guarantee the obligations of Permanent Mineral Trust Fund investment earnings and funds to be transferred into the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. Funds deposited into the reserve account created by this section are intended to be inviolate and to constitute a permanent or perpetual trust fund. Now, will that stop a legislature 6 years from now coming in and tapping that fund for some other purpose? It won't. The lawyers tell us that by a majority vote, they could still do that. To truly make it inviolate, you would need constitutional amendment. But we have good precedent that in fact, this would be left alone that way. We have the Hathaway corpus has not been bothered. The reserves, we've not bothered. The Wyoming Resource Natural Trust it has a statement in it that we want it to be inviolate. We could override that and start tapping that money. We've not done so. So we have precedent in some of these other funds that when we say we want it to be inviolate, it's a statement of purpose that in fact that has happened. On page 9 down to lines 16 and 17, what we say here is we want to get the reserve account to 245% of the spending policy. That is 7 times. That works out to be 7 times what the spending policy is for the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. If we skip over now to page 10, we see the same pattern for the Common School Public Land Fund. On line 9, with the same statement that we intended to be inviolate. And then on lines 20 and 21, where we say we want the reserve accounts to get to 7x or 420% of the spending policy. Going over to page 11, the same pattern is repeated for the Excellence in Higher Education Fund. Then at the bottom of page 11, we start a series of strikeouts of something that was amended into the bill in the House, which is an income account and a spending policy for the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust, which wasn't even in the title of the original bill, has nothing to do with it. So we're striking that out. That's 12, 13, 14, and the top of 15. Then on page 15, 16.1.111, this deals with loans to political subdivisions. So there's a provision in law currently that says when we make a loan to a political subdivision, the loss fund reserve is to be made up out of the PMTF, and we're trying to unload these obligations out of the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund so that it can be invested more wisely. So what this does on the bottom of 15 to the top of 16 is simply strikes the language that says the loss reserve will come out of the PMTF. So you say, well, where will the local loan loss reserve come from? It'll come from origination fees. Okay, page 16 to 17, we're back to the same pattern. Hathaway is intended to be inviolate. And the Hathaway is a different cat. It has a spending policy that's a combination of dollars and percentage. So they both had to be adjusted to say, our objective on the reserve account is 7x. Now on pages 18, 19, you'll see those are all struck out. Those are the appropriations that were in the bill and are now contained in the budget bill through page 20. So I know that that's a lot to cover. And with 5 years on capital finance and investments and appropriations, even I struggle sometimes to make sure I can wrap my head around it. But the net positive of it is we're not going to spend that money, we're going to sock it away. We're going to sock it away for downturns, and then we're going to put enough away that it can be invested much more wisely so that we don't do things like leave $370 million on the table just because we hadn't taken advantage of how we could invest it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Is there any discussion? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I was trying to listen to that explanation, and I thought I heard the argument made that we could touch the corpus of the Hathaway endowment, but we hadn't, and that was a reason for confidence in keeping things inviolate. Maybe I misunderstood the explanation, but I would point out that if you look at Article 16, Section 20, clearly the Hathaway corpus is inviolate by Constitution. And that is something I think I've heard this misunderstanding a time or two, Mr. Chairman. And I think that's something we do need to understand.
Senator Kinski.
An error that the declaring by 2/3 vote of the legislature that an education fund is inviolate does in fact make it binding on future legislatures. But there are other examples where we have not tapped into these accounts that way.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the amendment?
Question on the amendment.
Question being called on the Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 89. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 89 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Is there discussion? See, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, just wanting to make sure, is the policy set forth in this bill fully consistent with what we have done in the budget bill this year?
Senator Kinski.
Mr. Chairman, yes. Our objective in the budget bill was to try to get these reserve accounts to at least 5X. And we came close, and they will continue to fill. And the objective then is to continue to fill that fund until we get to 7 times the earnings. But it's absolutely consistent with what we did in the budget bill. In fact, the numbers that we struck out here in the appropriations should line up with what was in the budget bill.
Is there any other discussion? Is there a question being called?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Kinski's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that House Bill number 89 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. House Bill 89 has passed the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chairman,
Majority Floor Leader Hicks.
I request the Senate stand at ease to the sound of the gavel for a 10-minute break to give staff a break, and we'll get started again at 4:15. Just for everybody's information, we're going to work all the way down to House Bill 33. We got a long ways to go here yet today. I'm going to try to get the schedule set up so if we can get these things done, that we can get out of here a day early next week. So that means today and tomorrow and next couple of days, we may be working till 6 o'clock. It just depends on how fast these bills go, but that's the plan right now, Mr. Chairman. So if we could stand at ease to the sound of the gavel.
Committee of the Whole is standing at ease.
Yeah. So, Larry.
Let's call the committee of the whole back. Senator Kinski. Whoop, got the wrong mic.
Let's give everybody a chance to get in here and get seated if we could, Mr. Chairman. I think the president's here, coming here somewhere. Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee of the whole rise and report. No, yeah, no, we're supposed to do enrolled acts. Oh, no, I move that the committee of the whole beg leave to rise and sit again. Excuse me.
Everyone heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Good job. That was a big bill.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this. This is fun. We're at this order of business, signing of enrolled acts. This is House of Representatives Enrolled Act number 37, originally being House Bill 1.
House Enrolled Act number 37 being original House Bill 1, General Government Appropriations.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 37, originally being House Bill 1. I have so signed. So by Friday, we're going to be back for whatever the governor says to us. We're back to Mr. Vice President, we're at that order of business again.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that the committee of the whole, that we resolve ourselves back into the committee of the whole.
Heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion begins. Senator Larson.
All right.
I believe you drugged me out. I went and hid. I was the sneakiest spot I could find.
They found you.
They found me.
Our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 123. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 123, collection of antler or horns by residents and non-residents, sponsored by Representative Berger, an act relating to game and fish. Was referred to Committee Number 6, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Guru, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
Chairman Schuler, you have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure?
I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 123 do pass. There is an amendment. I'd ask that be read in right now.
House Bill 123, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 2B4.
Chairman Schuler.
Thank you. I forgot to say thank you, Chairman. With this, I think we will call on Senator Kolb to give you the, not only the amendment.
I cut you off a little quick. Sorry about that. Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here to explain this good little bill, I'll just start off by, in the bill title, it's an act relating to game and fish. And it provides that any shed antlers or horns on public lands are the property of the state. Next, we go over to page 2, lines 3 and 4. I'll just start over there. Continue on the property of the state, including shed antlers or horns located on public lands. So that's where it is in the bill. Move to page 3 and up to lines 2 to 4. And this is what the bill is doing. Any season to collect big game animal antlers or horns shall begin for residents 3 days before the start of the season for non-residents. Now, I guess, why is this an issue? You know, in the states, particularly in my part of the state, in southwest Wyoming, there are many out-of-state folks come in, and I'll say they geocache the horns or antlers, and then miraculously on the days that the season opens, they wheel out of there with a truck full of antlers. And you know, this bill is, will correct that by giving our folks 3 days of an advantage for collections. And that's really what this bill is trying to do. It's trying to protect Wyoming residents and give us a bit of a break here, so we too can collect sheds. And typically it affects my corner of the state more than the rest of the state. And I'll stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is not a new issue to this legislature, and even on the other end of the hall, we've taken it up and tried to understand it and grapple with it. My question is, why are we claiming ownership on public lands? I certainly don't want anyone claiming ownership to deciduous parts, meaning parts that fall off of an animal, on private lands, but why is it necessary in this bill to include them as property of the state on public lands? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, just a question about what testimony you might have heard from the department regarding this. Feels like it might be a pretty difficult thing to police out across the way, and I'm just curious what the department said about that, if we're going to compound some of the problems they run into trying to cover all the ground and get the work done. Thanks.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I asked that question myself, and I was told really it may help them in the long run because we will have fewer people lining up on that May 1st date. Even though they are a little bit shorthanded in the department right now, giving the Wyoming residents a head start for 3 days, they think will probably help with their enforcement. Because honestly, on May 1st, from what I've heard, I've not been up in any of these areas where they're doing the shed hunting, but it sounds like it's like the Daytona 500. And so, and the way they're going to check also to make sure that, you know, some of our out of state folks are not involved in any of that is they'll check license plates, they'll check registration, they'll check a variety of different things to make sure that it's just a head start for our Wyoming folks. And I had no idea, again, that these things are worth as much money as they are. But I mean, we have people coming not from out of state, but even from other countries. So I think this is just an advantage for our Wyoming residents. And the Game and Fish seems to believe that, you know, their wardens can handle the onslaught. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to do my best to answer the question about why are we calling these the property of the state? I believe it's because we have to promulgate rules and they have to be claimed by, they have to be property of the state because currently they are not. I can research this a little further for a better explanation if we move out of committee of the whole to do a better job at explaining that, but that's my broad understanding of why. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on the standing committee amendment? Seeing none. You have heard the motion. Okay, Senator Schuler.
I don't think the amendment was moved. I actually just had it read in. So I would go ahead and move Standing Committee number 1 to House Bill 123 and ask for your favorable consideration. Really, all it does is just add the state and public lands. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. So is that okay? Okay.
Sorry about that. You're correct. All right, is there any discussion? Question being called on the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 123. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 123 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Any discussion? Seeing none. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Schuler's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with recommendation that House Bill number 123 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. House Bill 123 is passed Committee of the Whole. Our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 64. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 64, Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account Obligations, sponsored by the Capital Finance Committee, an act relating to public funds, was referred to Committee Number 2, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Senator Kinski.
Move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 64, and there is a standing committee amendment I would ask that be read in.
House Bill 64, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 1, after.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 64, urge the body's favorable consideration. For an explanation of this bill, I will turn it over to my appropriations colleague, Senator Nethercott.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good senators, you have legislative stabilization reserve account obligations. The purpose of this bill is consistent with our total investment return policy of really understanding how to best utilize our state's assets, including those in the LSRA. And so what this bill does is it eliminates unnecessary or obsolete borrowing authority from the fund. Many of our state agencies have the LSRA as a designated fund to backstop their spending authority or other types of loan obligations from the fund. And what this bill attempts to do, and what the Capital Finance and Investments Committee did, was evaluate all of the usages on the LSRA that are no longer necessary, underutilized, or obsolete, and eliminating those from our statutes in order to free up some of those funds in the LSRA from those obligations, allowing for a higher return and usage of our LSRA dollars. And so moving through the bill draft, some of those accounts that are affected really are on page 2, has to deal with YDOT and their spending authority, taking it down to $100 million for their backstop spending authority from the 250 that I think was originally in there, or the 200 million was originally in there, taking it down to a 100, consistent with practices and history of the fund is utilized by YDOT. Again, going on, another page, bottom of page 2, modification there for the Common School Permanent Land Fund. Again, modifying that down. Instead of saying pooled investments there, we switch it over to the LSRA. Moving through the bill, we also touch on the Unemployment Insurance Benefits Fund, recognizing that they actually don't need it based on their funding. So that really is the bill. There is that standing committee amendment. So I turn your attention to that. This further deletes some more of those accounts. Limiting the amount of funds that can be transferred over in that 1-year position. So no transfer from the LSRA reserve account in any 1 year under the subsection shall exceed $250 million. This really helps just to limit the amount that's encumbered, allowing that the balance of the LSRA never get below 500 million. Our goal is always to keep that at 1.5. Right now, this past year, based on our actions, it's $1.4 billion. But important to keep that in mind for how we're doing. Interfund borrowing as well. This allows for, if you look at the bottom of page 1, line 33, the state treasurer may, not a requirement, but may utilize interfund loans to the school foundation program account to ensure statutory payments are made when dedicated revenues are not yet received. Interfund loans under this subsection may be made from the LSRA, or to the extent insufficient funds exist in the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account, the Common School account within the Permanent Land Fund, and interfund loans executed under this subsection using funds from the LSRA reserve account shall not exceed an aggregate amount of $400 million. And so just kind of the transfer of funds from back and forth. This was an amendment approved by your Senate Appropriations Committee, brought forth by the chairman. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions on the amendment. If not, I'd call for a question on the amendment.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to be clear on the amendment. There's two different funds here. The first one talks about no transfer made in any 1 year shall exceed. I think that should be the total transfers within 1 year is 250. So I don't know if that maybe could use some clarification. The second one does not have a time limit on it, or at least it's not within the language on that page. So is there something somewhere else where there is a time limit on the interfund loans and the 400 million? Thank you.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, both good questions, and we'll have to bring back an answer on the second. It's a good catch.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. You have heard the motion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 64. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 64 has been adopted. Is there any other more discussion on the bill? Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is regarding the LSRA and the draw from the school account. I'm wondering, I thought that we created a reserve account for K-12 for the common school. It's a reserve account there. So what is the justification for leaving the automatic transfer from the LSRA when we have created a reserve account? Could we just have a little bit more information on that? Thank you.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a good question, and one that I asked myself, because I said, if we're going to 7X, do we still need this interfund loan? And the answer is yes, because the schools have a big timing issue. Their expenses come August, September, and all the collections come a couple months after. So there is typically an interfund loan. We've calculated it here at the 400 million to be above what its all-time high ever was, to give us plenty of margin, but it still puts a cap on it. Currently, there's just no limit on what that could be. So the big gain here is having a limit, so the balance of the LSRA doesn't have to be kept liquid. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator Kinski's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, they do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 64 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. House Bill 64 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 108. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 108 engrossed, sale of THC vaping devices and edibles to minors prohibited, sponsored by Representative Summers, an act relating to children. It was referred to Committee Number 10, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Barlow, Bouchard, Dockstader, and Hutchings. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Chairman Baldwin, you've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My pleasure is when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, to do so with a recommendation that House Bill 108 do pass. And I will turn for explanation to my alter ego, myself. Fellow Senators, I bring to you the latest installment in the Wyoming Legislature Organic Chemistry 101. I know, Mr. Chairman, that at least since you and I have been in the legislature, we've been dealing with variations of this issue. Some of the senators in here will remember talking about the drug spice. I can't even tell you how many years ago that was, probably 4 or 5 anyway. It seems that this is further evidence in the best and the brightest chemists that we have among us and in the world are doing illegal things. This all began when we started talking about hemp a number of years ago and legalizing some of the things that we do with hemp. And that has morphed into the chemist creating something that is not physically related to hemp. It's not physically related to what you're seeing in the CBD oil that you buy at the store to relieve your aches and pains or your anxiety or any of those things that it's advertised for now. It is a totally separate substance. It's an analog, but it is not based in the organic world. It is a completely manufactured, completely built chemical substance which has all the same effects of the THC products without being organically related. Well, the consequence of that is that it's not controlled by our laws, because our laws were written to control the things that were tied and connected to the organic product, which this one is not. It's an analog, it's completely artificial, and again, the chemists have outdone themselves and have created something to keep something legal on the market. The biggest consequence of this, and the reason it was brought to us, I know that this came from the representative in one of my areas in the school district in north part of my area, and it turns out it's happening in every school district across the state, as we heard in testimony. There's a number of children are being brought in as young as 12 years old, or perhaps even younger, but 12 was the age we discussed, all the way up through senior in high school, being brought in, can't speak, can't walk, they're drooling on themselves, heart rates are rapid, blood pressure is through the roof, and it's being caused by these products, something called Delta 8. And you may or may not have heard of that. And I invite you, I know one of my committee members went and spent some time in the smoke shop down here, in the vape shops, which I haven't done yet, but I'm going to. So when you hear rumor of me being in a vape shop, it's not because I'm buying vapes. But apparently you can go in and the products are widely available. The Delta 9, which does have laws surrounding it, but Delta 8 is available as well. What this bill aims to do is to get some of this out of the hands of these kids and make our schools safer. Now, I guarantee you right now that there's chemists out there, as they're listening to me online, they're already starting to work on something new. But the language of the bill is written broad enough that we should be good for a while. Famous last words, I know. But that's what this bill does. We want to make our schools safer. And the way we're doing that is by working through the bill. And I won't bore you by reading page by page, as we want to prohibit the sale of edible products. And I will just give you one example. In the other chamber, as I walk around over there occasionally, they have big jars on their desk full of gummies, gummy bears. They don't have, well, they say they don't have THC in it. We'll just presume they're telling me the truth. Gummy bears are a very popular thing. And I saw somebody just sent around something yesterday about where gummy bears are made, but that's another story for another day, the parts that they contain. But those that contain THC, those that are made from this Delta 8 product, are they potentially have a very large amount of the THC product in them. When you eat one of those gummy bears, you digest it through your liver, through your gut, and it takes a while. It has to pass all the way out of your gut into your liver. It takes a while to go through. So somebody can eat one of those, not feel the effect. They eat another, still don't feel the effect. They may eat a whole handful of those things and they start to feel the effect, but because those things all add up and take time to take effect, when they take effect, they've taken an overdose and they end up with the things like I was just telling you about, drooling, not being able to talk, not being able to walk, et cetera, et cetera. When you vape something, it has a different effect. When it goes through the mucous membrane, it takes effect immediately. It's very quick. And that's what these kids are looking for when they eat a Skittle that's tainted with the Delta 8 product, or when they eat a gummy bear. They're expecting that same rapid response, and it doesn't happen that way. So kids are ending up with an overdose, and it's unintentional, but it's just the way the body works and the way the body processes these things. So that's the effect of the bill. I know I've talked with several of my members. I know there's some committee of the whole amendments that are proposed, and I believe there's a contemplated perhaps second reading amendment as well. If you'll read through the bill, there's no consequence to the kids. There's no punishment or anything to the kids. I know there's an amendment being considered that would put some consequence to the kids when these things are taken to school, that there's a consequence and we can better control them. With that, I would ask for the committee of the whole Amendment 1 to be read in.
House Bill 108, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 6, line 1, delete.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you. I would move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 108. Just a brief explanation. This amendment comes by virtue of the state labs. And what this does, if you read through the bill, in a lot of places it talks about, let me just find one. I'm here on page 6. It'll make it clear. The way that this bill was written was to say controlled substances Now I gotta find it. Anyway, it says controlled substances and analogs. In truth, the analogs are controlled substance. So what this amendment does is it takes that controlled substance and analogs of the controlled substance out, because they are a controlled substance all in and of themselves. And we take the Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 drugs out and just put the reference in statutes where these controlled substances are put, so that it fits in there and it's included. The analog is included within the language that we already have in statute now. And that's plain and simple what this amendment does. It makes life easier on the lab, makes it easier to identify these things. And that's the one good piece of news that I didn't mention when I explained to Bill. Because this is so closely chemically related to the THC, to the cannabinoid, yeah, and I can't even say it now, tetrahydrocannabinol, it is identified on the tests that are out there. There's a buccal swab, there's a urine test, there's a number of different tests, but it's closely chemically related, so it is easy to identify. With that, I would ask for your aye vote on the amendment.
Any discussion on amendment number 1? Seeing question being called. You have heard the motion on committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 108. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 108 has been adopted. We're on committee of the whole amendment number 2.
House Bill 108, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2 to engrossed copy, page 6, line 16, after.
Thank you. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2 to House Bill 108, and I ask for your favorable consideration. This is a real simple amendment. And I don't know, I'm going to say that again because it looks like everybody's sleeping. Real simple amendment. If you turn to page 6 of the bill, it says vaping products mean any device that can be used. And I'm going to stop right there because that's what it says, any vaping device that can be used. So I was very concerned that we would just cause more confusion with law enforcement and even our fine citizens, that we made a law that restricts something, and I don't think that's the intention of the bill. People use vaping products for CBD, other items, and I certainly don't want to put them in the back of a police car. So that said, what the amendment does, right after any device, it says containing THC. That's what we're doing in the amendment. So the device has to have the product in it. A lot of times when they go into these stores, they'll preload the vape device. So this is fitting. The amendment goes on to line 17, and it says is being used or has been used to deliver THC. So that's what we're doing in the amendment. Goes on to page 7, line 1, where it says vapor pen and any similar product or device that uses, and we're changing that. We're actually deleting that. It says, so we're deleting uses or, and just so it goes straight to contains THC. So simple amendment. I think it's going to clarify things. It was a big concern for me in committee. I want to make sure that we have good policy, that we don't tie people in the courts and have to prove that they weren't doing what they were doing, doing something that they weren't doing. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions?
Any discussion on amendment number 2? Seeing none. You've heard the motion on committee of the whole amendment number 2 to House Bill 108. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Committee of the whole amendment number 2 to House Bill 108 has been adopted. We're on committee of the whole number 3.
House Bill 108, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 3 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 3, delete.
Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 3 to House Bill 108 and ask for your favorable consideration. This amendment has a lot to do with the title of the bill, and that's where I really found some problem here. It says,
It says, sale of THC vaping devices and edibles to minors. And then when you go down in the bill, you'll see right away it says age 21. Under Wyoming law and statute, a minor is 18, not 21. And I realized what the intent was to try to follow some of the tobacco laws, but I just don't think we should be doing that. I think we should, we can send them to war. We darn sure don't have to add another law to the books where we're going to make somebody underneath the purview of the state. And I got to tell you, if the other amendment that was talked about, if it passes, we're going to start making people criminals at those younger ages. So I want to get ahead of that right here. What this amendment does is it deletes 21 and inserts 18. Simple amendment. I think it's fitting to the bill. The bill's title says it right in it, minors. So I'll stand for any questions, and if not, I'd like to ask for your vote on this. So yes vote. Thank you.
Any discussion on amendment number 3? Seeing none. You have heard the motion on committee of the whole amendment number 3 to House Bill 108. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Committee of the whole amendment number 3 to House Bill 108 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief thing here is that is, if you haven't been into your schools, you haven't talked with your local police, I invite you to do so. If you think it's easy to identify these vapes, it's not. There's no odor, they're small, they're tiny, and they're easy concealable. Schools got a lot of technical means to try to discover these, but I'll guarantee you it's not 100%. They're still getting through. And they're everywhere around you. You've been around them. I guarantee you've been next to them. You've been somewhere where somebody was using them. It's a big deal. So I would have you go into your schools, have you talk with your local police department. It's a big deal. They're everywhere. They're just prolific in our schools. With that, I would encourage your aye vote, and let's see if we can protect our kids.
Any further discussion on this bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with recommendation that House Bill number 108 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 108 has passed the committee of the whole. Our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 144. The reading clerk will read the bill if I hand it to him.
House Bill 144, Senior Citizen District Programs and Services, sponsored by Representative Strzok, an act relating to senior citizen service districts, was referred to Committee Number 7, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Landon, acting chairman.
Senator Landon, you have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Oh, sorry, maybe Senator Case. Senator Landon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a do pass recommendation on House Bill 144. For an explanation of the bill, I think that I could go to the senator from Converse County. All right, he's back there. I wasn't looking back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead and do a brief explanation of the bill here. Ladies and gentlemen, what this bill does is effectively expands the amount of services a senior citizen district can provide, and certainly been apparently quite the discussion over in the other chamber. And so I'll just highlight what the bill does currently. You'll see you'll have a copy distributed to your desk that would show what the bill will look like if you pass both the standing committee amendment and the committee of the whole amendment, which I highly encourage we all do. But basically, ladies and gentlemen, on page 2, as the bill currently stands, you can really see what the bill is trying to do. I point out page 2, line 19. We're very aware of mental health and dementia services, so allow them to cover those services as well if the board so chooses. Also, we'd give them clear authority to do maintenance on senior housing within their district. So this is something that was kind of a constituent issue. We have a new senior service district in Converse County, and lo and behold, the mill levy produced quite a little bit more than they were expecting. And so they're sitting on about $8 million worth of reserves right now. We're looking for ways to make sure that taxpayer money actually gets spent, and doing so in a way that provides some interesting additional options for everybody in the state, not just one district. So that's why you'll see the significant amendments. That's been the work of the committee, and then later on the committee of the whole, to ensure that this really works for everybody. It's not just for one district, but that really we have a bill that's going to allow our senior citizen districts throughout the state to provide these enhanced services if they choose to do so. Once again, this is not mandatory. This is just increasing the menu of options that our local districts have at their disposal. So that's basically the bill, Mr. Chairman. I could go to the standing committee next if that's okay. I'm not sure if that was right in or not.
House Bill 144, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 8 after.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 144. Ladies and gentlemen, what this does, on page 2 especially, it tweaks some of the language to make sure, once again, some of the discussion we had in the committees, make sure that it covers any district in the state, not just one. So for example, on page 3, line 3, we're including, nonprofit corporations provide affordable housing, making sure that, it's not too prescriptive, making it, broad. And so that, once again, at the discretion of that local board, they can fund housing or improvements to facilities. I think we heard this morning, Mr. Chairman, that that's certainly a problem. And so if the board so chooses, this would expand their ability to go ahead and take care of those facilities. And so it does that. Also, some of the interesting dynamics that we got into once the bill kind of hit the floor on the other side is that there's some districts out there that don't want this additional authority, at least not with the without the approval, the express approval of the voters. And so what you have in basically page 4 of the bill and 3 is some provisions that would go through what is required to expand services. So what we have in the standing committee amendment, and if you pass that, we'll go to the committee of the whole meant to clean some of that up. But the concept here is that you'd have to get approval of the voters to expand the amount of services that you cover. This was a concern from some of our districts that didn't, maybe my levy doesn't go very far. They don't want to risk the entire district with the expanded options. That was their concern. So that was a provision that was put on the other side to address that concern. And what the standing committee amendment does also, Mr. Chairman, is it says if you have more than $4 million in reserves, you can go ahead and expand those services before the next election, as long as you have a public meeting. So that was the balance that we found. I think everybody that had concerns about that $4 million mark is pretty good. It's a pretty good delineating point. And I point out that it's simply just to get us to the next election. So that's what the standing committee amendment does. I'll stand for any questions on that.
Is there any discussion on standing committee amendment number 1? Seeing none. You've heard the motion on standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 144. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 144 has been adopted. We're on committee of the whole amendment number 1.
House Bill 144, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 3 after.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 144. Ladies and gentlemen, what this amendment does is 2 things, basically. After further discussion, we realized that we need to take care of new boards that are forming or new districts that are forming. And so the first part of the amendment that would go on page 1, line 9, effectively gives that procedure for the initial approval of a senior citizens district, saying that they have to stipulate what services are going to be offered on that ballot for the initial approval by the voters. So that's the first thing that the amendment does. The second thing is it moves into codified statute, not non-codified statute, those provisions that we discussed in the standing committee amendment dealing with you need to get the voters' approval if you're going to expand services, and then that limited on page 2 of the amendment, line 44, simply between the effective date of the act and just that gap to get us to the next election. We have the provisions that we previously discussed. If you want to expand services before that time, you have to have a public meeting and you have to have more than $4 million in your reserves. Once again, that is a very limited provision in our statutes meant to be the bridge between when this bill becomes effective and the next election. So that's what the bill does, make some cleanup with those provisions I just discussed, but also make sure that we take care of the circumstance where you have a new board being formed, a new district being formed. So that's the committee of the whole amendment. I'll stand for any questions on that.
Any discussion on the committee of the whole amendment number 1? Seeing none. You have heard the motion on the committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 144. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 144 has been adopted. We're back on the bill.
That's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I'll stand for questions.
Any discussion on the bill? Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go along for the ride here till we get to third. I've just really got some hesitation. I remember when this district first came up, it failed, and finally it was written in such a way that it did pass. And it was written in such a way that at the time I voted for it, we were voting for programs like, I think this is an okay to say name, Meals on Wheels. And programs to help seniors with necessary housekeeping and, you know, that kind of thing, the senior bus. And I've got one county that passed this and they promised the voters that's all they would do. Now, I see that it's been accommodated in the Second Amendment that if they're going to change their purpose, they have to go back to the voters. So I appreciate that. And I voted for that amendment, but it's just, we're expanding way, way beyond what the original concept was. And I was a little hesitant even to vote for a new district initially. And as I go through, and I appreciate the markup of both amendments, but as I go through this almost looks like an interim topic more to me, because the bill has gone through such transformation through 2 amendments. I don't know, I could be convinced, but I'm just really hesitant of the great expansion of this tax and the purposes in it, Mr. Chairman. I've really got to think about this one. Thank you.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly appreciate the comments. Like I said, we addressed those concerns in the amendment. And I've been in contact with an individual from Johnson County, and I heard the exact same thing this morning. After reaching out to that board for over a week now, yet to hear a specific example of what they would do differently. And I'm still waiting on that. I look forward to getting some feedback on that. But we've addressed those concerns with the amendment, Mr. Chairman. If they don't want to expand services, then don't expand the services. You're going to need the support of the voters to do so anyways. So I wish I could say I understood the concerns, but I've been asking what the specific concerns were, and I've yet to hear an answer. So this is really important. I have a tendency of trusting our locally elected boards. There's plenty of citizen involvement, plenty of ways to gauge voter support. I understand the hesitancy if they were just going to go out and expand services, but this isn't what this bill does anymore. And so we've gone out of our way to accommodate those concerns. The fact that the concerns haven't changed is perplexing to me.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? If not, are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 144 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Thank you. Chair is in doubt also. Those in favor, please stand. Those opposed, please stand. House Bill 144 has passed the committee of the whole by a vote of 18 to 13. Our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 276. Will the reading clerk please read the bill?
House Bill 276, engrossed, shed antlers and horns conservation stamp, sponsored by Representative Wiley, an act relating to game and fish. Was referred to Committee Number 6, which turned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Carew, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. Chairman Schuler, what is your pleasure?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 276 do pass. There's a standing committee amendment. If I could have that read in, please.
House Bill 276, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 2, after.
Senator Schuler.
And with that, I would ask Senator Jones to explain both the bill and the amendment.
Senator Jones.
I ask for your favorable consideration on this amendment. It's basically cleaning up the bill and adds in state lands to be included with public lands. We deleted the current start time of 6 a.m. in case that's changed in the future. And page 3, lines 6 through 8 and lines 10 through 17 are deleted entirely as they are unnecessary. And I ask for your favorable consideration on this amendment. I can move on.
Is there any discussion on the amendment number 1? Seeing none. Oh, Chairman, or Senator Ellis, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little further discussion on that. In the committee, we've been seeing a number of bills that explicitly provide agencies with rulemaking authority. And so there's a little bit of concern just on the drafting side of adding that language again and again and again. I think generally we try in the green books to provide our agencies with broad rulemaking authority. And so that language should only appear unless they actually need it. And so when we delete some of those sections, it's not that we're trying to take away the ability for the agency to do rulemaking. It's just that the language is duplicative. So I just want to be clear with the body. So you've seen that a couple of times coming through your TRW committee. That's something we've asked the agencies as they've been before us. Do you need new rulemaking authority explicitly in this bill? And the answer we've got is no. So for those listening and want to understand why those deletions were not taking away rulemaking authority, it's just that they already have it. So on and for the amendment.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. You have heard the motion on the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 276. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 276 has been adopted. Is there any further discussion? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My landowners are very concerned that it'd be awful easy to put private land in there, just like we've put public and state land. And they're very concerned that we would say that shed antlers are the state's property on their private land. So we don't have that in there yet, but they're already concerned that this could move that way. Thank you.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The language on page 3, I'm just wondering if on behalf of a nonprofit corporation, an out-of-state entity can come into Wyoming and not have to purchase one of these stamps. Thank you.
Senator Jones.
I'll explain the bill a little bit. This bill is to protect the Wyoming heritage and traditions. For the purpose of this act, all wildlife in Wyoming is the property of the state, including shed antlers or horns located on public and state lands. Non-residents who come to Wyoming will be required to purchase a conservation stamp in order to legally collect the antler sheds. In case you're not aware, a conservation stamp is $21.50, and this funds access to lands for hunting. 85% goes to access, and the remainder goes to wildlife conservation efforts through Wyoming Game and Fish. There are a lot of people who come into the state to collect the sheds and leave without any benefit to Wyoming. In some areas of Wyoming, this has become a feeding frenzy. These shed collectors who come to our state will now have time to purchase their conservation stamps, enjoy our hotels, buy gas, groceries, eat at our restaurants, and in our Wyoming towns and communities. This will positively impact the local economies and bring some money to the state. This will not affect private property. Antlers and horns on private land are property of the landowner. And I ask for your favorable consideration on this bill.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just back to the senator from Natrona County. So one of the amendments, that's something the amendment does, if you look at page 3, it says a conservation stamp shall not be required for residents of Wyoming, and then any person under the age of 15. There was language, I believe, added down the hall that had to do with nonprofit corporation or organizations. I think there might have been some testimony that you might have some out-of-state people who's part of a nonprofit maybe being exempt as well. I suggested and brought the amendment to the committee that said, I think that starts getting a little difficult to enforce. So this would just limit it to Wyoming residents and those minors under the age of 15 not needing the stamp, and getting rid of the ambiguity about the nonprofit organization if you have members who maybe are from out of state or not. Essentially, we don't want this to create some kind of loophole that's difficult to enforce.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious. Will we be able to use night vision devices and thermal devices to find these antlers? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, no, because they're stone cold.
Senator McEwen.
It's been my experience that night vision works on cold things also. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
President Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, will we be able to track them down with a microchip?
Ooh. Ooh.
Point of order on the amendment.
All right.
Lost it.
Seeing no others standing for discussion, question being called, all those in favor of Senator Schuler's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that House Bill number 276 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. House Bill 276 is passed committee of the whole. Our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 33. The reading clerk will read the bill.
City and town funding? Probably not.
House Bill 33 engrossed, School Finance Career Technical Education Grants, sponsored by the Education Committee, an act relating to school finance, was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Brennan, Rothfuss, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Scott, Chairman. Was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Chairman Scott, you've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move when the committee of the whole rise and report it do so the recommendation that House Bill 33 do pass. There was a standing committee amendment. I ask it be read in at this time.
House Bill 33, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 4, delete.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, for an explanation of both the bill and the standing committee amendment, I yield to Senator Brennan.
Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you House Bill number 33 and ask for your favorable vote on this. And I also want to point out that there has been a handout, a pretty colorful handout that says career and technical at the top that helps kind of explain a little bit of the benefits of this bill. So this is a bill, an act relating to school finances, establishing competitive grants for public schools to purchase career and technical education supplies, materials, and equipment. And then this bill lines out a lot of things. We heard some great testimony from young students that are involved in these CTE programs, just how much they're benefiting from being in these programs, the skills that they're learning that they can take then into the future, into their adulthood, as they look at being productive citizens and really helping our economies here in Wyoming. On page 2, starting at lines 13, it talks about the grant that is awarded for this section, that they would be $50,000. And then I would move at this time Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 33. So what the Standing Committee does is the House put in that the school districts would need to match the funds for this grant. And this just deletes that requirement so that the school districts don't have to match these grants and that they can just be asked for. Then the rest of the bill is, I'll just go to section 3 on page 6, that this would appropriate $250,000 from the Public School Foundation Program account to the Department of Education beginning July 1st of 2023 and ending June 30th of 2024. And with that, I'll take any questions on the amendment.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? Question being called. You have heard the motion on the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 33. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 33 has been adopted. Is there discussion on the bill? Oh, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in full support of this committee bill that comes out of the interim. I just found myself thinking this afternoon, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, we are almost bumping into each other trying to do what we can for CTE, and that's my only caution on this front. I'm not sure I could explain to the constituents back home all of the things that we've done on this front, nor can I explain all of the money that we have made available. This one's a little different. I like the approach that it helps our schools to get what they need because these programs are very expensive. But that's my only caution going forward for our Wyoming Senate is that, you know, maybe we need a chart or something just to make sure that we're not overlapping here and there. We sure don't want this to get to a point that we find in our early childhood programs, for example. So just would appreciate any thoughts on that front from the Education Committee. But anyway, I support the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise with some concerns about this as well. We worked on this bill in the interim and heard some testimony about the funding that goes towards CTE. As you know, career and technical education is part of the basket of goods. So it's funded through our school finance education resource block or our model. And so that is the question, you know, if we're allocating dollars in the model, then we're adding and layering on another grant process on top of that. So that was my concern all along, you know, certainly support CTE education for our students. But this does get into that realm of, you know, we started asking, why is what's provided in the model not sufficient? And I think if you look at the data in this, if the committee has that in front of them, I think it was something like 60% of what's funded in the model is actually going towards CTE. So the dollars allocated that we spend on these and these are expensive programs are used elsewhere. So if anyone on the committee has that data a little more fresh, I don't want to say that 60% is the absolute number, but that's the number that comes to mind when I think about this. But that is the concern is, you know, a grant on top of something that should be funded and should be provided for. Are we setting a precedent for doing this in other areas?
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I want to tag on to my colleague. That was my first concern when I read this. So there was any discussion about this, and you look at the size of these grants, it's very limited to a very small number of districts. Was there any discussion that these districts that are already in the model receiving funds for CT&E and then they choose not to do that? I don't know why we would turn around and then give them another pot of money when they've chose not to fund CTE already at the local level. So is there any discussion to say those districts that currently have CTE are using that block grant money that they receive under that model for CTE would be the only ones that were eligible this for above and beyond what they're currently? I have real concerns that we're studying the situation here, and why wouldn't we, if we're gonna do this, give it to those people that already have a full-blown CTE program up and running and need additional resources versus supplant something that's already in the model?
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good points and good discussion, and this was at the heart of some of the discussion we had during the interim. I'd encourage the body to read through the way this is structured, and you'll see the new creation at the bottom of page 1 is Career and Technical Education Equipment Grants. This is important. It's the idea that it takes quite a bit of tooling and quite a bit of cost for many of the CTE programs. There are funds available both through the model, and in fact, there are federal Perkins 5 grants that are available as well, a lot for support of programs, some for equipment. The idea here is that this equipment and retooling is effectively a costly procedure. So the discussion on the Education Committee was to, while we have some funds available, provide a grant program by application to every school district where they can demonstrate a specific need. Maybe they, need some new equipment in the wood shop. Maybe they need a CAD CAM machine. Maybe they need some culinary arts programming. But it's not specifically to add or hire new individuals. It really is to build the facilities up, to purchase the equipment that then can be utilized. So while there are funds available in the block grant, we know that it is a block grant. We've heard that it's a challenge to procure the equipment because it tends to be a one-time cost, and therefore it ends up being expensive, more than what the districts can save up for. So, Mr. Chairman, the idea through this is then to provide through a distribution on both a baseline consideration, $30,000 per district, plus $42.50 per ADM, so that there's some discrimination based on the district size, the availability of grant dollars to purchase the equipment. Now, if you don't have a robust CTE program, I don't know that you would apply for the equipment because you're going to need somebody to actually teach with this equipment. But it targets specifically the idea that I think was raised by the good senator from Natrona County and others, that it is a one-time grant. It's not ongoing. It works well for one time because we're basically saying, hey, we've got some money available, Mr. Chairman. Buy some new equipment, tool up. You might not be getting this again anytime soon, but since we have some funds, we understand the importance of CTE. That's been a priority of this body and certainly the Education Committee. Let's use a little bit of it, release those funds, buy some new equipment, get some shiny things that hopefully improve the education in all of our districts, and then improve the quality of CTE education in the years ahead, Mr. Chairman. So I think it does address the concerns that were raised today. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, in addition to the emphasis on the equipment, which is a real problem, this is, when we have the money, this is the time to do some one-time spending on equipment. And this is where the aim of this is. Mr. Chairman, historically, a lot of the equipment has been purchased through the federal Perkins funds. And the testimony we heard in committee was that those funds have declined. And so that there is a problem that's developing there that makes it extra hard for them to keep up to date on the equipment because it does wear out. And frankly, the real world improves what it's doing, and we need to get equipment that reflects what the real world does. So for those two reasons, I think that this is a good shot at dealing with this kind of a problem.
Senator Hicks.
And another question I have with this is, most of these districts, and I'm familiar with the ones that I have down in Meyer, we also have BOCES, and they purchase a whole lot of this kind of equipment that we're talking about, and they make arrangements with a number of the school districts at a certain period of time to come in and use some of this equipment. So why are we not including, or what was the discussion as far as, maybe expanding the authority of utilizing these equipments and coordinating with BOCES to make sure the stuff that we're using for adult education, which is designed for CTE. That's why we fund that. and to build these trades, whether it's a machinist or a carpenter or whatever specialized equipment. So how does the BOCES play into this? And what was the discussion in the interim as far as using the equipment that's available through BOCES?
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, we had significant discussion during the interim on the issue of BOCES. And one of the things that really jumped out at us is that in many parts of the state, the BOCES don't do that sort of thing at all. You have BOCES for various different reasons. Sometimes it's providing special ed, sometimes it's used this way. In my district, it's used, for instance, to pay tuition for students, high school students going to the community college. So BOCES is a solution that works for a few of the districts, but wouldn't work everywhere. And if the equipment is purchased, then it can be used at the very different levels. You have to have some arrangements and some understanding between the various different levels that are giving instruction. But just going to BOCES funding wouldn't get the problem solved in most of the districts.
Any other discussion on the bill? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with recommendation that House Bill number 33 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Committee of the whole, or the House Bill 33 has passed the committee of the whole. All right. Senate Majority Leader Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
Woo-hoo.
Reading clerk will read the Committee of the Whole report, please.
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 38 in gross, do pass. House Bill 103, do pass. House Bill 59 in gross, do pass. House Bill 89 in gross, do pass amended. House Bill 123, do pass amended. House Bill 64, do pass amended. House Bill 108 in gross, do pass amended. House Bill 144 in gross, do pass amended. House Bill 276 in gross, do pass amended. House Bill 33 in gross, do pass amended. Senator Larson, Chairman.
Senator Larson. Senator Larson.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of the committee report.
Sorry, you can say it again now that I didn't turn it on.
Okay. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Okay, noes have it. No. Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Standing division, huh? All right. So, concurrences. Let's do them. You bet. Let's get them out of the way. We got plenty to do. Senator Landon, are you ready for message number 387 on Senate File 32?
Mr. President, I am.
Reading clerk will read it in, please.
Message number 387, referencing Senate File 32, prohibiting drones over penal institutions.
Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. I would move concurrence on message 387, referencing Senate File 32, prohibiting drones over penal institutions, and ask for your favorable vote. Fellow senators, what they did down the hall was actually to tighten up the bill a little bit. I don't think it hurts the intent of the bill as it went out of the Senate. They added the language after intentionally using these devices and inserted the language trespass over or in a penal institution or on the grounds of a penal institution with an unmanned aircraft system. That obviously tightens it down a little bit further, Mr. President, but I don't think it tips over the bill. It still meets the intention of what I think the interim committee sought to accomplish, and so I would ask for your favorable vote. Thank you.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question. So does the application of the bill only when the drone is directly over a prison property? And intentionally flying over does actually change the standard of proof associated with the criminal element, but is the application of the bill only when it's directly over a prison institution? If so, I would urge your no vote, which avoids the entire purpose of the bill, which is to protect the prison or any correctional facility of being videotaped by drone above to watch the pattern of the correctional officers or the inmates in order to harm them, or obviously to throw in contraband or other types of things, but certainly you can effectuate that without being directly over a prison. And we want to discourage that particular behavior associated with the prison. The nexus is the prison.
Thank you. Further discussion, Senator Landon.
So the chairman's exactly right. What I described as the language that was added down at the other end of the hall certainly does not change anything that we were doing with respect to over the top of the prison, and the idea is to protect that environment. Because the testimony that we received, Mr. President, was that anytime one of these unmanned aircraft systems was used and came over the top of or anywhere near the prison yard, for example, they were having to shut those facilities down. So if you go to page 3 of the bill, under paragraph B, that's where they brought in the language that included trespass over or in a penal institution or on the grounds of the institution. I think that remains in the spirit of what we were trying to accomplish, which is to protect those prison environments and not have to shut them down as what they testified was happening out there. So I think that the bill accomplishes what we set out to do, and I think we can vote it through and it'll be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Motion is that the Senate do concur on Senate File 32 and vote aye. The Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Senate File 32, concurrence roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? No. Whiteman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? No. Hutchings? Ide? No. Jones? No. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. Hutchings?
Excused.
Excused. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Closing vote? Kinski, aye to no. Baldwin, aye to no. Close. Landon, aye to no. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 32, 4 aye, 26 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have failed to concur on Senate File 32. Committee will be Landon Chair, Nethercott, and Cooper. Senator Boner, are you ready for concurrence on message 393, Senate File 16?
I am, Mr. President.
Reading clerk, read it in, please.
Message number 393, referencing Senate File 16, state employee moving expenses.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for concurrence on Senate File 16 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our state employee moving expenses bill that we passed out of this chamber. Seems like a while ago now. But one of the amendments that we had towards the end of the process over here was limiting only to YDOT. And the idea being, at least in my mind, was that if we limit only to YDOT, then all of a sudden we'll hear from all the other agencies that maybe we're looking to take advantage of this provision to help retain their currently highly qualified employees. And so what happens is went to the other side and they heard from actually a few agencies, mostly dealing with law enforcement and corrections and game and fish, that actually this was something that they would like to take advantage of. So what happened is that they took out that provision we put in. So now this was back to the way it originally came to us, and that it applies to all state employees. This gives all of our department heads the flexibility to pay for moving expenses for their employees. So that's where the bill is now. I'd ask you for your favorable consideration. I think this is the right thing to do to provide that flexibility and that decision-making authority to our department heads so that we can continue to chip away at this retention issue that we've been having in state government.
Further discussion. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and reluctantly, I'm going to have to ask you to vote no on this, and let me explain why. As we sent this out of here for a single purpose, and that was to address YDOT's concern, and I understand some of the other agencies now want to participate. That's fine, but when I look at this bill as it came out of the House, 33 ayes and 22 noes on the other end, Mr. Chairman. That's a pretty weak position for us just to recede from our position and give up. And I think we ought to take an opportunity to go down and visit with our colleagues down there. Looks to me like they're pretty vulnerable, and we need to defend the position of the Senate. And so I would ask you to vote no, send a committee back down there and defend the position of the Senate.
Further discussion. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, that's usually all very fine, but in this case, we're having quite a problem right across with getting people in some of the remote areas and whatnot, and there's a real need. Mr. Chairman, frankly, I think the House got it right, and we ought to vote aye.
Further discussion. Senator Bowman.
Okay, for the second time, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think we all know that this retention issue does not simply apply to YDOT. Maybe it's more pronounced there, maybe it's not. We all know this is a problem with overturn or the turnover within all of our state agencies, not just YDOT. Furthermore, once again, I agreed to this amendment of limiting only to YDOT with the idea that if we get it wrong, we'd hear about it from those other agencies, and that's exactly what happened. So this isn't a House versus Senate thing. This is about what's right for the state. I urge you to vote aye.
Thank you. The motion is that the Senate do concur on Senate File 16 and vote aye. Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Concurrence roll call vote, Senate File 16. Anderson? Aye. Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner?
Aye.
Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Aye. Case? Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Garu?
Aye.
Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings, excused, aye?
No.
No. Jones? No. Kinski? No. Kolb? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. Case?
Excused.
Excused. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 16, 16 aye, 13 no, 2 excused.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 16. Senator Schuler, are you ready on message 394 on Senate File 38?
Yes, Mr. President?
Reading clerk would read it in, please.
Message number 394, referencing Senate File 38, special license plates, organ donations.
Senator Schuler.
I move adoption of Joint Committee, Conference Committee Report number 394 to Senate File 38 and ask you to vote aye. This is a really, really simple addition, I guess you would say, from the folks down the hall. They liked the bill. They liked it so much that they really didn't like the fact that we would have to sell 1,000 of them by 2031. So they amended that back to 500. And so that's really all the concurrence does. Just amends it to 500 from 1,000. And I would ask you to vote aye.
Discussion. Seeing none. Motion is the Senate do confer on Senate File 38 and vote aye. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Concurrence vote, Senate File 38, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 38, 23 aye, 8 no.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 38. Senator Boner, are you ready for concurrence on message 392, Senate File 178?
I am, Mr. President.
Reading clerk, read it in, please.
Message number 392, referencing Senate File 178, mountain lion pursuit seasons.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move concurrence on Senate File 178 and ask for the body's favorable consideration. Mr. President, what we have here is the substantive change is that basically this mountain lion pursuit season will be limited to resident houndsmen only. So this is something that I guess was prior to the other side. After discussing with the stakeholders in this bill, they're okay with it. Roughly a third of folks who have mountain lion permits are from out of state, but the idea is that if you're going to be taking advantage of this pursuit season and doing it here in the state locally, it's going to be much more of that. More than 2/3 are going to be taken advantage of by local hunters and houndsmen. So overall, I think this has a very small effect on the overall bill and its actual implementation. And so for that reason, after discussing with the stakeholders, I think we can support this change that we made. Ask for you to vote aye.
Thank you. See no further discussion. The motion is the Senate do concur on Senate File 178 and vote aye. Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Concurrence roll call vote, Senate File 178, Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Murphy? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinsky? Aye. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? Aye. Nethercott? Excused. President Driscoll? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 178, 18 aye, 12 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 178. This is your day, Senator Boner. Senator Boney, are you ready on message number 386 on Senate File 21?
Yes, Mr. President.
Chief Clerk will read it in.
Message number 386, referencing Senate File 21, high occupancy vehicle lanes.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for concurrence to Senate File 21 and ask for your favorable consideration. Senators, what the House did on this one, this is our high occupancy vehicle lanes, as we had robust discussion about over on our side of the building. 2 minor changes. First of all, as you recall, we had some discussion about the level of fines. It was rather high. I think, $600 and up to 6 months in prison. We changed that to $25, $50, and $75 for subsequent offenses. What the House is, they basically went in and doubled all that, not even close to what we had at the beginning of the bill, but so instead of $25, we have $50 on the first offense. So that's a relatively small change. Also, the other change is saying that they're not going to toll the HOV lane. You could argue that's already in statute. This is unnecessary, but they went ahead and made it explicit that they're not going to put a toll on that HOV. So relatively small tweaks. I ask for your support.
No further discussion. The motion is that the Senate do concur on Senate File 21 and vote yes. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 21, concurrence roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Murphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? No. Kinsky? Aye. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 21, 17 aye, 14 no.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 21. Standing committee reports. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I just want to give the members a heads up that tomorrow you'll be asked to take a look at concurrence on Senate File 61, legislative per diem. And I would encourage everyone to take a look at the House action so you understand anyway what we'll be considering tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the heads up. Everybody do your homework. Standing committee reports.
February 21, 2023. Mr. President, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 74 engrossed, Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Anderson, Carew, and Nethercott. Excused Senators Kinski and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk. Other than that pile. Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move the Senate stand adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Oh, we can do them in the morning. And that,
Do I need to withdraw my motion, Mr. Chairman?
not unless you want a bunch of enrolled acts signed at the end of the day.
Don't do it, Mr. President. I don't rescind my
Announcements.
motion.
I cut myself off. We're good.
Mr. President,
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
announcements. The Republicans will be caucusing at 9:30 in the morning. I don't know if it's room 110 or 113, but it'll be right down below here. So for you folks, I think there was a couple of you that were tardy last time. Put a sticky note on and say 9:30 for the Republican caucus.
Depends what party we're in tomorrow. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your number 5 committee, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet at 10 minutes after 6 today in room W2 and online to consider the following bills: House Bill 17, State Lands Grazing of Non-Owned Livestock, and House Bill 11, State Park Rangers Retirement. Thank
Senator
you.
Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs will meet today upon adjournment, let's say 6:05, in Capitol Central Room W4 and online to consider House Bill 199, license plate decal breast cancer awareness, House Bill 2, Town Officer Salary Waiver, House Bill 286, ETS consolidation.
Senator Land.
Mr. President, your Committee 1 Judiciary will meet at 8:30 in the morning to take up House Bill 128, voyeurism within enclosed spaces. Thank you.
Watching you for that one. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee Number Perfect 10 will meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning in Capitol Extension 6 and online to hear House Bill 4, Medicaid 12-month postpartum coverage.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, Committee Number 4, Education, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in room W110 downstairs. We're going to continue our work on House Bill 34, School Finance Mental Health Services, and take up House Bill 209, Hathaway Scholarship Accounts Transfer Time.
Thank you. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources. Just a reminder, we'll be meeting tomorrow instead of our usual Thursday. We'll be meeting at 4 o'clock in Capitol Extension Room W6 and online to hear House Bill 200, non-resident hunting licenses application fees.
Chairman Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Upon adjournment, the Senate Appropriations Committee will be having an informal get-together in room 311, not to last more than 15 minutes.
Thank you. Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee Number 3, Revenue, will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, February 22nd, upon noon recess in Capitol Extension W6 and online to take up our last bill of the session, House Bill 121 engrossed, Property Tax Deferral Program Amendments.
Senator Hicks, Majority Floor Leader. Hicks.
President, to amend my further announcement, we will be meeting at 9:30 in room West 113 downstairs. 113.
Thank you. Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Democrats will be caucusing right here. Unfortunately, you had to register 7 weeks ago, so sorry about that. Thanks.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, Senate will stand adjourned till 10 a.m. on Wednesday, 2/22/23.